when he was living on the streets, when his eyes started showing him success rates for everything floating blue percentages, 0, 14, 100%, they hung over. Doors, people, cars, and lottery tickets, every single choice had a number. That morning his landlord changed the lock before sunrise. He had $12, a dying phone, one backpack with his entire life, and the eviction notice folded in his hand. Bad odds sleeping outside, worse odds begging his landlord. Then he stepped into Marvin Teague's convenience store. A $10 scratch card had one number floating above it, 100%. He stared long enough for Marvin to notice. He did not know if the number meant he would win, lose his mind, or waste the last money keeping him off the streets, but since he was already locked out, he tossed $10 on the counter. Marvin glanced at the eviction notice still folded in his hand. Is that rent money? No, he replied, it died of neglect. The guy standing behind him laughed once. Marvin slid the card over with 2 fingers like poverty might rub off on him. Marvin told him not to scratch it there and cry. No tears on his counter, Marvin warned. He grabbed the little plastic scraper, chained to the machine, and dragged it across the silver. 10,000 tiny flakes curled under his thumb, 3 matching symbols, $200. Frozen for half a second, he stood completely still. Then the blue number vanished. As a thin blue window unfolded in front of him, chance sight active, he almost dropped the card. Marvin leaned over. Well, he showed him the symbols. Marvin's mouth tightened. Lucky, don't get stupid, the guy behind him told him to buy another one. Then he slapped $10 down before he could even answer, pointing at the same row. He demanded whatever the kid had touched. The card Marvin handed him had a dead blue 0% floating over it. The man scratched like violence could change math. Nothing matched. He stared at the gray dust on the counter, then glared at him like his miracle had been stolen by. Standing too close, jinxed, the man spat. He almost told him luck is not contagious. Instead, he looked back at the rack and asked a careful question. Chance of copycat wins, just 1%, but chance he wins by choosing based on the numbers, 97%. That was worth way more than 200. Wait, this is huge. The system was not in the tickets themselves. It was sitting right between his question and his own decision. Nobody else could grab it off the rack. Just because they saw him smile, Marvin saw him staring and snapped his fingers, telling him not to start praying at his lottery wall. He replied he was not praying, but shopping. He should have just walked out with the 200, found a cheap motel, charged his phone, and thanked whatever had pitied him, but instead he bought another card. This time he did not just grab the first 100% he saw. He looked at the rack and asked the only question that truly mattered. What was the chance this card wins anything? Instantly the numbers shifted. Some jumped, some died. One card that had shown 100% dropped to 3% when he asked about prizes over $20. Talk about a mind-bending twist. It was not luck, it was grammar. Pick one, Marvin snapped. You are holding up the line. He pointed at a cheap loser near the bottom, choosing that one. Marvin smirked and handed it over. 0%. He scratched it anyway and lost. The guy behind him laughed even louder. Marvin's shoulders relaxed. Good, let them think. His first win was a fluke that had already burned out. Then he asked an even better question. He checked the chances of a $500 win. The entire rack went almost completely dark. Just one card glowed 92%. He bought it. Marvin watched him scratch. The laughing bystander stopped completely as soon as the second symbol matched. At the third match, he leaned forward hungrily. $500. No lucky comments this time. Marvin snatched the card, scanned it, and just stared. He stared like the machine betrayed him. Cash it, he ordered. Marvin snapped that his counter works fine. Well, let it prove that then. The entire line stopped looking at the rack. They watched his hands. Minutes ago, he was a broke guy wasting rent. Now, an audience. A miracle always stays quiet until the big money starts making noise. Marvin slapped down $20 bills and told him to get out. He smiled. He thought customers were good. Addicts are bad for business, Marvin sneered, especially lucky broke ones. He offered to ease Marvin's mind. Give me 3 guaranteed losers. Marvin frowned deeply as the young man bought 3 dead cards, scratching them in seconds. He lost on every single card. The crowd lost interest almost immediately. One woman went back to her phone. Luck always evens out, someone muttered. That was perfect. He let his face fall, intentionally looking hungry and desperate for another chance. He looked past the dead cards, whispering another question to his inner system. Which card pays the absolute highest before Marvin refuses to sell? the system answered. 74% chance on a $20 ticket. It was far from perfect. Too many variables: Marvin's temper, the cash, the crowd, and cameras. He had to act completely normal as he finally bought the card. Marvin hesitated before sliding it over, warning that it was the last one. Marvin claimed he owned the store instead. He scratched very slowly. Rushing made people suspicious, and his hand had actually started to shake. The first panel paid 50, the second hit 100, and the bonus reached 2,000. An old man whispered in pure shock. Marvin's face went completely flat. He tapped the counter, telling him to scan it. Marvin accused him of counting. That is the dumbest accusation ever. He walked in here homeless. The old man laughed into his coffee cup while Marvin finally scanned the card. The machine chirped loudly. Marvin stared at the screen, then at him. Marvin hissed that he needed to leave, promising to ban him the second he paid. Marvin glanced at the camera. He desperately wanted to invent a rule. Suspicious winner, stored discretion. He saw his frantic thoughts. Anything that would let him keep the cash and throw him out before anyone noticed. He asked his system if Marvin would delay the cash. 86%. Knowing this, he placed both hands flat on the counter and refused to budge at all. He smiled directly at the camera, keeping his expression incredibly calm and relaxed. Go ahead and tell everyone the machine is broken, he dared, speaking very loudly. The old man turned around. The woman raised her phone even higher. Marvin saw the tiny audience forming and absolutely hated it. His eyes darted from the camera to the raised phone, then back down. The imaginary rule he wanted to invent died right in his throat. He quietly counted out whatever cash he had left and printed a voucher for the remainder. He shoved both toward Evan. The line watched him obey. For a broke man, obedience was sweeter than money itself. Evan tucked the bills into his jacket, turning for the exit. Marvin called his name. Evan turned. Marvin nodded toward the storage hallway, asking him inside. Old habits almost made Evan say yes. Because bosses and landlords had trained him to jump the moment they called. But his new self paused. He asked Chance Sight first. Would Marvin try something? 2% chance of robbery. Want something? 99%. That was much safer and more profitable. Evan followed him 2 steps into the narrow hallway. No trap here, just far enough to keep their conversation private. Marvin crossed his arms, demanding to know what he was doing scratching cards. Evan told him to sell them, mocking that acting cute costs extra. Marvin's jaw worked. He accused him of having a method or an app. Evan glanced at the rack. The blue numbers floated there, patient and impossible. Evan pushed back. Marvin stared. As if Evan had insulted his mother and offered terrible stock advice at once. Then Marvin looked down at his phone. A new projection suddenly flashed above it. Probability. Marvin asks about his condo sale, 88%. Evan almost laughed. Chance Sight was no longer just waiting to pick cards. It read rooms now, absolutely wild. Marvin saw his face change. Marvin demanded to know why he was not worried about scratchers freezing in place. Evan pointed at Marvin's phone. You are waiting on a buyer for a condo. The offer feels low, but you are too terrified to push back. Marvin's mouth opened, completely speechless. That silence was worth another $100. Evan put a clean question to Chance Sight. Will they accept $312,000 if Marvin calls in the next 5 minutes? 91%. Will they walk if Marvin waits until tonight? 68%. Evan told him to counter at $312,000, say another. Showing is scheduled, waive the repair credit, and call instead of texting right now. Marvin's suspicion turned ugly. Fear hates being exposed. He demanded to know who told him. Your face, phone, and cheap shoes, Evan replied. Mostly the shoes. Marvin sputtered. Wearing expensive shoes doesn't fight a broke guy over a $2,000 scratch card, but someone desperate to pay their mortgage before the deadline absolutely does. Chance Sight hadn't spelled all that out, but it was close enough to sound human. Marvin glanced at the front counter. The line was growing restless. His anxious thumb hovered over the screen. He muttered that if this was a joke, Evan would pay. Still, Marvin placed the call. Evan heard only his side. At first, Marvin sounded tough then. He went incredibly quiet. Marvin proposed $312,000, demanding no repair credits today. He claimed he had another showing, then listened. His eyes slowly lifted to Evan. For the first time since they met, Marvin Teague looked at Evan completely differently. Not as poor nor rich, but far worse, useful. Hanging up, Marvin muttered they had agreed. Evan offered congratulations and asked how much. Marvin asked for what, demanding his absolute silence. Evan smiled, pointing out those were two separate services. Marvin absolutely hated that. Yet the sudden condo sale had cracked his stubborn world open just enough. Marvin offered $500, but Evan simply turned and started walking away. Marvin yelled 1,000, then 5,000. Evan stopped near the end of the aisle. He consulted Chance Site. What is the probability Marvin pays $12,000? 83%. Evan demanded $12,000. Marvin screamed in disbelief. The old customer by the coffee machine stared again. Marvin swallowed his rage, completely defeated. He didn't shout, telling Marvin he made that much by not being stupid for 5 minutes. Marvin stared, then pointed toward the little office behind the counter. Marvin demanded the transfer, then told him to leave. Evan shared his account and watched him type. His phone was nearly dead, but it buzzed with $12,000. Not a promise, not a maybe, not a client demanding endless revisions, a real transfer. Evan's knees went weak. Marvin noticed and tried to recover his old, smug position. He wasn't special. Evan pocketed his phone. Yesterday, Evan couldn't afford a stale hot dog. Today, Marvin paid him for a phone call. He warned Marvin to be careful about who he called special. Suddenly, the old man laughed, coughing. Marvin flushed. His phone buzzed again before he even reached the door. For one stupid second, he thought Marvin had sent more, but it was his landlord sending a cold warning that all his stuff would be in the hall by 6. The old desperation dragged him back. He could pay, run back, and wave cash, begging at the exact same door that had already shut him out. Chance the landlord. Returning the key today was 9%. Chance he adds fees and still keeps him out was 84%. He deleted the message. Changed lock was still a changed lock. Money never made a petty man generous. Price to demand. Evan walked right out before greed could make him stupid or old fear made him crawl. Outside, Harbor City looked the same. Wet sidewalks, bus fumes, and the same landlord with his stuff already thrown into a cheap plastic bin on the curb. And get this, glowing blue numbers were flickering over everything now. Chance of the alley being safe, 41%. Motel clerk renting for cash, 76%. Chance the landlord letting him back in today was only 9%. He almost laughed at that last one. Even supernatural math knew a petty man. Evan had cash but no home. He had a miracle but no manual, just enough to breathe but not enough to stop being angry. Suddenly, a massive force slammed directly into his legs. A silver husky with bright blue eyes skidded across the sidewalk, leash dragging. Tongue hanging out like the world was built for his personal entertainment. Designer collar flashed brightly under his neck with a tag reading Rocket, the energetic dog. Sat on his shoe and barked. Evan looked down, saying he wasn't emotionally. Dog, Rocket barked again, and a glowing blue window opened right above his collar. Chance collar predicting that following Rocket would have a direct impact on the Evan. Rose housing problem, 100%. Talk about a rude system. Evan looked toward the cheap motel sign down the block, then back at the rich dog wagging his tail on his only clean shoe. Fine, Evan muttered, but if his owner is broke, I am. Owner was broke, he would sell his collar. Rocket grabbed his leash and dragged him away, heading toward a cleaner, wealthier part of Harbor City, where sidewalks grew taller. Yesterday's version of him would have been asked to leave before he even touched the gate. Rocket dragged him 3 full blocks before he finally accepted that the dog had way better housing prospects than he did. Rocket cut across the wealthy Harbor City like he owned the sidewalk, the traffic lights, and possibly a huge trust fund. People smiled at him, but stepped around Evan like around him like he was just a stray leash. Meanwhile, the blue window kept its little window above his collar, reading owner impact on housing problem at 100%. He better be leading him to a mansion, Evan muttered. Rocket sneezed. He finds the dog's owner posing in front of a shiny glass high-rise, taking pictures of a coffee cup while her expensive dog sits completely ignored 10 feet behind her. She is pretty. In that effortless way rich folks are when they never have to choose between paying for dinner or laundry. Big sunglasses, pristine white sneakers that have never touched a public bus, phone held high, zero survival instinct in sight. Rocket lets out a bark. The woman looks down and gasps, calling Rocket a little criminal before looking up. Her smile freezes just long enough to silently judge his cheap jacket. He holds up the leash, asking if this unemployed prince belongs to her. She grabs it, thanking him repeatedly and explaining the dog escapes when bored. Must be rough, he replies dryly, mentioning he also slips out when landlords lock him out. She just blinks. confused, so he warns her to keep the pup away from busy traffic. As the dog leans against his leg, like they survived a war together, the woman pushes her sunglasses up, revealing bright, shameless eyes as Tessa. Whitlock, the name means nothing to him, but his chance system immediately flickers, showing that she belongs to a high-value antique circle at 87%. With only a 12% chance, she understands why it actually matters. Tessa reaches into her tiny purse and pulls out folded bills as a reward. He counts it quickly with his eyes, a cool $200. Yesterday, he would have taken it and thanked her like a savior, but today, Marvin T. had already paid him $12,000 to leave his store. Standards are rising fast. He takes only 120, leaving the rest. In her hand, surprised, she asks if he is refusing her. Just a discount, he replies. Because taking all of it makes her think she can buy her way out of being careless. Taking only 20 will annoy her enough to make sure she remembers his face. Tessa laughs out loud, calling him weird. Honestly, she's not wrong. But he replies that since he is recently upgraded from homeless, weird is progress. And her expression softens. She offers to have her driver take him to a decent hotel. Of course she has a driver. The chance system suddenly flashes, showing a 63% chance of useful future access if he accepts. But there is a 94% chance it will hurt his pride immediately. He prefers a fed pride but still rejects it, demanding a door nobody can lock. On him, Tessa nods casually and suggests he simply buy a place instead, saying Harper City condos are ugly, but owning the lock hits very different. She says buy one like normal people say buy gum, making the nearby motel sign look incredibly small, but he wants a door nobody can take away. Tessa says it with a runaway dog at her feet, as if rent was just a bad habit poor people failed to quit. He resents her but needs her level of cash even more. Rocket suddenly barks toward a distant market banner, advertising weekend stalls at the local antique market, sparking a sudden new idea. He asks his system if he can turn today's cash into real house money. At the antique market, the screen flashes back a 64% chance. Not completely safe, but way better than ghostwriting for demanding, cheap clients who pay late. Tessa notices his gaze drifting toward the big colorful banner and asks if he likes antiques. He replies he likes anything that makes money. Well, that is a depressing hobby, she laughed, almost as bad as losing dogs. When Evan stepped away, Rocket tried to follow him until Tessa pulled the dog back. Ro, she called out. Evan stopped, realizing he had never told her his last name. It was sticking out of his pocket. She warned him to hide things better. That stung because she was completely right. She waved the leash as she spoke. She told him to buy a condo with a dog park since Rocket loves everyone. Her grandfather took the dog's judgment seriously. Just then, Rocket stepped on Evan's shoe. It felt like a vote of confidence. Tessa laughed, claiming the dog had standards. Very low standards, she teased. Evan joked that made two of them. Little did he know, this dog had just wagged him toward a life-changing gate. An opportunity money could not buy. Later, Evan headed down to the local antique market. The place looked like every scammer in town had set up a dusty folding table. They had fake dust for atmosphere, brass lamps, and cracked pocket watches. There was cheap porcelain, dirty coins, and paintings with fake smoke stains. Every stall had a story that cost extra, but his special vision changed everything. Most items had terrible success rates. A glass horse had a 4% chance. A silver bowl had a 0% rating, alongside a painting of a sad boat with a 7% success rate. Evan had to bite his cheek to keep from laughing. He stood there too long, quickly drawing the attention of 3 hungry vendors. These predators loved staring marks. One seller immediately waved a pocket watch. He pitched it as a rare estate piece with real history for today only. Another vendor tapped a porcelain plate, promising he could literally feel the age. A third vendor, exceptionally wide and loud, blocked Evan's path with a greedy smile. He urged Evan not to let those other scammers rob him and invited him over. He introduced himself as Frank Russo. The surrounding sellers laughed at the claim. That reaction said everything. Frank wore a flashy jacket, a gold chain, and deep confidence. He had the look of a man who never gave refunds. His stall was pure chaos. It was packed with rusty tools, fake bronze figures, and dusty old coin boxes. Then Evan spotted a dirty bronze compass buried under some chipped paperweights. The compass was heavily dented and tarnished, looking like cheap garage junk. But his system popped up, a 78% chance of being a real antique. That is huge, an 89% chance of making $50,000. His heart raced, so he quickly looked toward a fake lamp instead. Frank pounced. He praised his good eye, claiming the lamp came from a private collection. Evan dryly noted that private does not automatically mean it holds any value. The neighboring seller snorted. Frank sneered, mocking Evan's small wallet. Evan replied that his wallet had actually improved quite recently. Frank shoved the fake lamp over, daring him to buy something. The resale rating was 0%. Evan picked up a cracked paperweight instead. He asked for the price of the junk box. Frank looked surprised. He wanted 20 each, but Evan offered 5. Frank gasped in mock offense. He complained about the low offer, whining that Evan was insulting these old pieces. A crowd began to form. These sellers loved watching a newbie get ripped off. Frank loved the audience. He leaned close, lowering his voice for theatrical effect. He told Evan to go buy lunch, saying this market was for real players. There it was, the classic scammer line, just wearing a different coat. He set his backpack down. He counted out $900 in cash. Frank's eyes immediately glued themselves to the bills. The whole junk box, including that compass underneath it, no takebacks. His greed moved faster than his suspicion. Done, Frank said immediately. A neighboring vendor laughed, asking if he really just sold the kid garage trash. Frank swept the cash away. Trash with a happy ending, he sneered. He reached. Frank's fingers twitched toward it first. A tiny movement, a huge confession. Not that one, Frank blurted quickly. That was actually under the box. The neighboring vendor laughed harder, mocking him because he just said the whole box. Frank snapped to stay out of his business. He kept his hand on the lid, checking his screen. Would Frank back down? 79% chance if the crowd hears no takebacks. He raised his voice. Frank Russo treats beginners fairly, right? Whole junk box. No stories, no takebacks. He said it right in front of the entire crowd. Not because they liked him. Vendors hated getting caught in their own sales pitch. And buyers loved watching it happen to someone else. Frank's jaw flexed in frustration. He could fight for the compass, but he had already pocketed the cash in public. Greed signed the receipt before suspicion even read it. Frank pulled back. Take your trash, Frank spat. He lifted the bronze compass out last. The number changed. It reacted when he touched it. Chance Victor Calder makes the highest serious offer. If displayed publicly, the probability is 82%. A specific name appeared this time. He didn't know Victor Calder, but the market certainly did. He set the compass down. He placed it on the table instead of packing it away. Frank frowned deeply. What was he waiting for? For your happy ending to get expensive, he replied. A thin man with a jeweler's loop stepped up. He did not offer a name. He did not need one, bidding $5,000 for the compass. Frank froze. Frank laughed so hard he slapped the table, until he noticed the kid was serious. He checked, while refusing pushed the price past $150,000. 88%, he flatly refused. The thin man blinked in utter shock at him. $5,000 before it was even cleaned. He smiled. Thanks for confirming its value. The crowd shifted closer as Frank's smile went crooked. Hold on, $5,000 for that. Talk about instant regret for Frank right here. Then Kendra Stone walked in. She stepped into the circle, looking like money itself had decided to wear a sharp coat. Her eyes shot directly to the compass, then to him, then to Frank's clutching hands. 10,000, Kendra offered calmly. The thin man cursed quietly and stepped back. Frank completely forgot how to breathe. He just smiled back at Kendra. He refused. She tilted her head, asking if he knew who she was. Not yet, he replied. The crowd chuckled, but Kendra remained dead serious, instantly raising the bid to 25,000. System check. Will Kendra stop before 200,000 if Victor Calder arrives? 19%, so Victor was indeed the bigger fish here. Kendra's face instantly sharpened. She was definitely not used to hearing no from a guy with a torn jacket sleeve. 50,000, she demanded. Frank squeaked. It was a beautiful sound. Then an older voice spoke. A calm voice from the back made every vendor in the area instantly straighten up. 120,000. The crowd parted for Victor Calder. He wore no flashy jewelry. No expensive watch, just a dark coat, silver hair, and incredibly sharp, piercing eyes. Eyes that made every fake item look cheap. Kendra turned slowly. Kendra protests that she saw it first, but Victor Calder ignores her, looking straight at the young man. Victor asks if he bought it first, and the kid confidently nods. Every head spins toward Frank, whose face goes pale as old glue. Victor nods once in approval. Victor bids 120,000. Kendra smiles sharply. She bids 150, Victor counters at 180, and Kendra steps closer at 200. Demanding he sell now for her forgiveness, the young man bursts out laughing, catching everyone's attention. Forgive, he mocks, pointing out she is bidding against an old man. He got it from a cheap junk box, so her forgiveness is already way too overpriced. The crowd hums with quiet excitement, and Kendra's face instantly flushes red with embarrassment. Victor's mouth twitches, and Kendra angrily bids. A 61% risk alert pops up, while Frank desperately whispers for him to sell. The kid ignores Frank, wanting him to stay out of the deal. Victor bids $240,000 with an immediate fund transfer. The system flashes green, indicating only an 11% chance of a better offer today. Stupidity is costly, so he nods to Victor and accepts. Kendra glares with pure hatred. She warns him that he will regret humiliating her publicly, and everyone nearby hears it. Frank hears nothing, staring at the compass like it killed his firstborn. Victor quickly arranges the transfer with a few taps on his screen. The young man waits silently, not wanting any lectures or unnecessary talk. He calls his assistant, and the young man waits patiently, not wanting any lectures. His account cleanly receives $240,000. Frank blindly tries to sit back down on his stool, completely missing the wooden edge of the seat. Sliding off, he makes the neighboring vendor wheeze with laughter. Frank's hands shake around the $900, desperately wishing he could cancel. The young man leans over the table, reminding him that there are absolutely no takebacks. Frank stares at the compass like the object itself exists solely to spite him. Victor Calder carefully wraps the compass in a cloth from his pocket before turning to leave. Looking right at the young man, Victor notes that such skills attract serious danger. He asks which category the young man falls into, highly curious about his incredible foresight. The young man simply replies all three, prompting a thoughtful nod from the elder. Victor walks away with the compass, leaving the entire market buzzing with newfound respect and curiosity. Suddenly, vendors who once ignored him want to showcase their private stock. Buyers who previously mocked his cheap backpack now watch his eyes with absolute, unwavering focus. Frank sits speechless, opening and closing his mouth like a helpless fish. Kendra waits until Victor is safely gone before stepping directly into the young man's path. Getting close enough to smell her expensive perfume, she radiates a bad temper. She flatly accuses him of knowing beforehand, completely ignoring his casual excuse about simple negotiation. As he tries to step around her, she aggressively blocks his way once more. Although the crowd has mostly thinned out, Frank and several nearby vendors are still intently eavesdropping. Kendra does not care at all, believing ordinary people around her do not deserve quiet whispers. Demanding he prove his trick on her now, she stares. She challenges him to use his trick on her, which is a terrible idea. His system shows a 92% chance of instant hostility if he decides to refuse. Answering holds a 94% risk, but that option sounds far more entertaining. He checks if revealing a secret will convince her of his powers. Instantly, the glowing blue screen pops up, displaying a massive 97% success rate. Below it, a sharp line of information appears, her birth time. A family cover-up. Evan's mouth goes dry as Kendra catches his expression. For the first time today, her anger melts away into pure fear. Kendra is terrified. Evan stares at the woman who tried to buy his win. She wanted his silence and obedience. Now, he had the leverage to strike back. Evan had to decide how deep to cut. Since Kendra wanted proof, he delivered. He gave her just enough to make her hate him, keeping it quiet in the market. Evan was greedy, not suicidal. He stepped closer, out of the vendor's hearing range. Keeping his voice low so others could not hear, he whispers, 2:17 in the morning. That is when you were born, and the south gate at your family's property. It did not crack in a storm. A car hit it. Someone important was inside. Someone important was in that car, and her family paid to bury the story. Kendra's face loses color layer by layer. She whispers, asking who told him. He reminded her she wanted proof. Her sharp voice makes Frank go silent. Evan steps back, warning her that she will only hate the truth even more. Kendra pulls out her phone, her fingers much steadier than her pale face. She turns away to make a call. Evan cannot hear everything, just fragments. 2:17, then the gate. When she turns back, her eyes are completely different. Her wealthy arrogance is gone, replaced by a deep curiosity with a grudge. She accuses him of stalking. Evan replies they only met 20 minutes ago. But her personality made it feel longer. Frank makes a strangled, nervous sound. Kendra steps closer, demanding to know exactly how he pulled this off. Then she does what wealthy people always do when fear embarrasses them. She tries to buy her way out, offering him $50,000 quickly. Tell her who talked and she will forget the insult, the system calculates. Taking the money makes her leave, 38%. Accepting her money makes her think she owns him, 99% chance. He was already owned by rent and late fees. He was not adding her. Keep it, Evan tells her. You need comfort money more than he does. Her smile twitches. Chance Kendra leaves him alone if he apologizes, 6%. Chance she escalates if mocked, 98%. He was already in trouble. Evan chooses style anyway, telling her to try being less predictable. Kendra smiles slowly, but the warmth is gone, she warns him. She tells Evan Rowe to enjoy his small victory in this market. People who embarrass her usually regret it. She turns and walks away. Frank leans over his table, hissing to ask what Evan could have possibly said. Evan calls it a birthday greeting. Frank warns she wanted his skeleton. Evan fires back that Frank should have sold his skeleton yesterday. Frank clutches his chest. He still hurts over that cheap compass sale. Evan wanted that wound fresh. He leaves the market before Frank complains more. And before Kendra can send her people back with a cleaner threat. $240,000 in his account makes his phone feel heavy. He should have gone straight to a bank or a safe motel. Instead, intense hunger drags him into a small restaurant with vinyl booths. Angry rich people forget to eat. Poor people do not. Evan needed food. He had just ordered when a woman slid into the booth beside him and kissed him like she was trying to win a bet. Evan froze, fork in hand, as a man across the table in a pressed shirt stood halfway up, face twisting in slow public defeat. The woman broke the kiss and whispered against his cheek, "Play along for 30 seconds," promising she would owe him, using him as a shield, 100%. Refusal causes a scene, 89%. Playing along creates future. Complications, 76%. Useful complication was the ugliest phrase he had ever willingly accepted, so he put his arm around her shoulders and looked at the man across the table, asking what he was saying. Nina's eyes flicked with relief. Introducing him as Evan, she announced clearly to the booths that he was her boyfriend. The man stared at Evan, saying, "Nina, this is pathetic," so her name was Nina. Price. Nina smiled with bright cruelty, saying begging after she said no was pathetic. "This is efficient," she replied. The man pointed at Evan. "You just grabbed the first guy eating fries." Evan looked down, saying they were good fries, which showed judgment. Two girls at the next booth laughed, and the man's ears went red. He reached across the table and grabbed Nina's wrist, demanding they stop performing and leave. Nina's smile disappeared. Chance he lets go if asked politely, 22%. Chance he lets go if the room laughs, 81%. Evan stood halfway, just enough to make the booth scrape loudly, telling him to release his girlfriend before he started. Believing his own lie, the two girls at the next booth laughed again. Someone near the counter yelled for him to let her eat. The rejected man released Nina. Like the whole restaurant had burned him, his face going red enough to warm the fries. Then Nina's parents arrived. Of course they did. Her mother saw Evan's arm around Nina and clapped once like a trap had finally closed. Her father looked Evan up and down with the calm suspicion of a man pricing repairs. Nina whispered that she could explain. Evan whispered back that she had 30 seconds and spent them all on kissing. Her mother slid into the booth opposite them, calling Evan the boyfriend. The rejected man looked betrayed by the entire building, claiming there was no boyfriend and she had just met him. Nina's father sat beside her mother, looking at the rejected man first, noting if she had to invent one to escape dinner with you. That answered his question. The restaurant enjoyed that. The rejected man grabbed his jacket and left with the stiff walk of someone trying not to run. Nina exhaled. Evan started to move his arm back. Her mother noticed. "Evan, was it? How serious are you about our daughter?" Evan stared at Nina. Nina stared at her. "Water." Chance a truthful answer ends this cleanly, 18%. Chance a shameless gets him out faster, 64%. Evan said serious enough not to discuss her future over fries. Nina's father surprised him by smiling. Good answer, bad jacket and recent landlord trouble. The jacket survived, the lease did not. Nina's mother leaned forward. "You need a place." Nina kicked his ankle under the table. Evan smiled through the pain. "I need several places. We are still negotiating which one I deserve." Her mother beamed like she had just adopted a project. "Come to dinner." Tonight, Nina said, Mom. Her mother ignored her. Real dinner, not fries. Nina's father added, and bring proof of income. I like romance, but I like numbers better. For one ridiculous second, Evan thought of opening his banking app to let the 240,000 do the talking. Then, a choice flashed above. Evan studies Na's face. The chance of Nina Price becoming a useful social shield if they're fake. Relationship remains unresolved is 82%. 82% chance she becomes dangerous if trapped by her parents tonight. 79% useful yet dangerous. The women entering his life all had the personality of scratch cards with knives under the coating. He stood up and took his backpack, claiming he had business before dinner. Na shot up beside him, offering to walk him out. Her mother smiled as if she had already ordered the wedding flowers. Her father pointed 2 fingers at him, demanding he come in. Personality first, Evan replied, deciding to disappoint him in order. Na dragged him out by the sleeve. Once on the sidewalk, she released him so fast he almost flew into a trash can. She apologized, explaining her ex would not stop and her parents were ambushing her. While he looked available, Evan remarked that was the most insulting rescue request he had ever received. She argued he played along while she was under mouth attack. For the first time, Na looked genuinely embarrassed. Then her eyes dropped to his torn cuff. She asked if he really needed a place today. Apparently everyone wanted to discuss his housing. She admitted her parents meant well, but ruined everything. They touch for sport, a rich family hobby, she joked. Things should have ended there. Clean, funny, and safe. Then Brooke appeared, stepping out from beside the bus shelter and grabbed his wrist. She was taller and sharper than Na, and her county police badge caught the sunlight before he processed her firm grip. Evan Rowe, Brooke ordered, demanding he come with her. Na stepped back in shock. Brooke did not look at her, stating it did not concern her. Evan looked at the badge, then at the hand twisting his wrist. He remarked he usually got dinner before handcuffs. Her eyes narrowed, asking how he knew her name. He mentioned her grandfather bought his compass. He added Victor Calder looked like he interrogated furniture. That earned him a painful twist. The chance of Brooke breaking his wrist by accident if he kept joking was 31%. Too high. Brooke pushed him against the side of the bus shelter. Na gasped, but Brooke finally looked her way, demanding to know how Evan had conned her grandfather. Na crossed her arms, asking if kissing her counted, since that was her fault. Mostly her fault. Brooke's grip tightened, warning her to stay out. A city bus groaned up to the curb behind them. The doors folded open as passengers shifted forward. A little boy with a school backpack hopped up the first step while his mother searched for a pass. An older man followed them. It was a normal afternoon with normal people, the kind of scene nobody ever watches closely until a sudden number warns how fast everything can turn into smoke. Evan was about to speak when a terrifying prediction flared across his vision. The chance of fire-related mass injury if the man with the black backpack boarded was 94%. The glowing number hovered right over a thin man in a gray hoodie stepping toward the door. He had a black backpack, hand in pocket, far too focused. Evan's mouth went dry. He mentally asked the next question. The chance of Brooke stopping him if he pointed calmly was 42%, but if he created a physical disruption, 81%. Perfect. His chance sight wanted him to play the fool. Brooke barked, demanding to know how he knew the compass was valuable. Meanwhile, the suspect lifted a foot onto the bus. Evan could have run. That was the painful truth he hated. The sidewalk behind him was clear, offering an easy escape. 72% chance he would avoid injury if he backed away and let the officer handle her own bus stop. Then the little boy turned around on the first step to ask his mother something. The clean number shattered. He raised his voice, shouting to the officer that he could smell fraud. Speaking of smell, he told her to check the guy carrying gasoline onto her bus. Everyone heard. The man froze. Brooke's head snapped toward him, but suspicion fought training for half a second too long. The man shoved forward. He hooked his foot around the dragging strap of Nena's purse on the ground. The purse jumped. Nena yelped. Brooke turned back toward him by instinct, thinking he had moved on her. He ducked under Brooke's arm and slammed his shoulder into the bus door frame, blocking the man's path without touching him first. The man cursed and shoved him. Brooke lunged, not at the suspect but him. He dropped. Her hand caught the black backpack strap instead of his collar. The man twisted away. The zipper ripped open. A plastic bottle hit the bus step. Clear liquid splashed out and the gasoline stink punched through the street. Someone screamed. A lighter bounced near the driver's shoe. Brooke moved like a snapped cable. She drove The man's wrist into the bus rail, kicked his knee, and slammed him face down. On the curb before he finished standing, Nena grabbed the lighter and kicked it. Away from the spill, the bus driver shouted for everyone to get back. Mother on the bus pulled her son against her chest so hard he dropped one shoe. The older man with groceries backed down with both hands raised. The passengers did not gasp for show. They scrambled, and that movement opened up the space. Brooke needed to keep the arsonist pinned. The crowd finally understood what had almost happened. Brooke cuffed the man with one knee on his spine. Her voice was cold and professional when she told the driver to shut the bus down and move the passengers away. Then she glared at him. Her anger was still there. Now fear sat under it. How did you know? Brooke asked. He rubbed his shoulder. He smelled like gasoline. Brooke's eyes flicked to the bottle, then to the crowd, then back to him. She noted she did not smell it until the bag opened. Maybe her grandfather bought the wrong compass. A bad line. Her face changed. Brooke grabbed the front of his jacket and shoved him back against the shelter. Chance of Brooke arresting him, 67%. Chance that a truthful explanation protects his special sight, 0%. He was deciding which lie would irritate her least when Nena stepped between them. Nena's voice was bright, sharp, and loud. Enough for the passengers to hear. Officer, get your hands off my boyfriend. Brooke froze. Nena hooked her arm through his like she had legal title to his elbow. He just helped you stop a psycho with gasoline, and now you are pinning him in public. Is this policing or flirting? The crowd turned fast. A woman near the curb agreed, saying he did block the guy. The bus driver pointed at him, saying he kept the guy off his bus. Brooke let go of his jacket like it had burned her. That was the second time that day a woman had saved him by making his life worse. Brooke looked from Nena's arm to his face. Boyfriend, she demanded. Nena smiled. Unfortunately, he admitted, it was a recent development, strongly disputed by management. Nena pinched his side without changing her smile. Brooke's gaze dropped to Nena's hand on his arm. It was not jealousy yet. It was worse for him. Brooke calculated the odds. If Nena was real, she had a witness problem. If she was fake, Brooke had a lie to pull apart later. How long? Brooke asked, but Nena answered, before he could ruin the moment. Long enough that his bad jokes are my problem. Condolences, Brooke muttered. Accepted, Nena replied. The crowd chuckled, and that tiny sound took Brooke's immediate control of the scene away. She could still question him, she could still follow him, but she could not drag him off like a nobody. After half the bus stop had just heard another woman claim him. Brooke lowered her voice so only they could hear. You are hiding something, Evanro. I do not know what it is yet, but if you keep predicting danger in my county, I will find out. Your county, my jurisdiction, my family, my problem. Pick whichever scares you. Then she stepped away to handle the arrest. Now released his arm and whispered, you attract terrifying women. He looked at her and replied, you kissed a stranger to weaponize him against your ex. You are not the safe category. She accepted that with a tiny nod, admitting it was fair. Before he could escape, a black car pulled to the curb. A driver got out, glanced at the police lights, and walked straight to him with a white envelope in his hand. The envelope had a gold seal and his name written across the front. Evan Rowe. No nickname, no mistake. The driver said it was from Kendra Stone. She said you would understand. This is an apology. Then he added in the dead voice of a man paid not to enjoy his errands. She also said the dress code is formal, so try not to embarrass yourself before she gets the chance. Now looked at the envelope. That does not look like an apology. Brooke, 10 feet away with the arrested man, heard Kendra's name and looked over. Kendra Stone apologizes with witnesses, Brooke noted, usually because she wants witnesses for the next part. Nag glanced at Brooke, asking if she knew her. I know the type, Brooke replied, claiming she was useful, not friendly, not safe, just useful. The police officer, the fake girlfriend, and the rich rival all stood inside the same 10 feet of sidewalk, and every one of them had a different reason to watch him bleed or bluff. Watch closely, he broke the seal. Inside was an invitation to the Harbor Charity Gala, a rich room, a public stage. Kendra's smile hiding somewhere behind it. The odds of accepting creating a major status opportunity are 88%, but walking into Kendra Stone's trap is 93%. He laughed once, now frowned, asking what was funny. He looked at the gold seal, then at Brooke, watching him like a case file with legs. Nothing, he said. It is just the first apology he had ever seen with teeth. The invitation did not feel like paper. It felt like Kendra Stone had mailed him a smile with a blade. Behind it, the gold seal sat on the sidewalk in his hand, while Brooke handled The arrested arsonist 10 feet away, and Nina Price kept pretending his arm belonged to her. The formal card announced the Harbor Charity Gala, but the numbers flashing above it said something less polite: the chance of accepting creating a major status opportunity was 88%, and the trap chance 93. He looked at both numbers and laughed. Na leaned closer, saying that was not the laugh of a stable man. Good, he said. Stable men pay rent. I am trying to buy doors. Brooke heard that from beside the police car. She looked from the envelope to his face. Kendra does not apologize unless she already picked the room where you lose, she warned. Then he should see the room. Brooke's jaw tightened. You just help stop a bus. Nat calls his plans a charity show, but Evan is focus-locked on one goal. He is never begging a landlord again. Sensing his resolve, Nat tightens her grip. It is her first real assist since their fake relationship began. She does not tell him. To play it safe, safety is only for people with real homes. Instead, she warns him not to go poor. Being poor isn't just about cash. It is about posture, letting wealthy elites set the terms before he even walks in. So the next morning before the big gala, Evan heads straight back to Harbor City. He still has no address, no clean record, and absolutely no clue what's waiting. But he has solid cash, a broken cheat ability, and a market full of targets. Now everyone watches his hands like a coming storm. Frank Russo spots him and freezes. He spins around immediately, looking like a man desperately trying to escape his past. Evan calls out to him, but Frank just grabs a broken lamp and fakes studying it. He refuses to look, complaining that Evan just wants to hurt him with math again. That was only once. Evan laughs. Frank whips around, still bitter over their last deal. He was forced to sell a $240,000 compass for $900. Evan says he just gave the compass a better home, making the next vendor laugh. Frank points blindly, snapping that his neighbor has zero soul and even worse inventory. This banter is standard here, but Evan needs something highly valuable for Kendra's main event. His special sight floats above the tables, showing small blue evaluation windows. Most items are junk, but the sellers have already learned to fear his gaze. Other buyers watch his hands. Just one crazy sale turned him into a legend. Then he spots Brooke, and things are about to get very interesting, guys. She stands 3 stalls down in normal clothes, staring intently at some porcelain pieces. Her face is deadly still, not with her usual cop focus, but family focus. A nearby vendor holds up a rectangular porcelain plaque with a light blue edge. It is a chipped old decorative panel priced at $2,000. Frank immediately wants it. As Frank drifts closer, Brooke grabs her phone, then Evan's special ability triggers. It says the plaque belongs to her missing family set at 96% probability. There is a 91% chance her grandfather pays millions for this item. But the chance she lets Evan profit quietly is only a miserable 3%. Deciding to skip asking, he cuts right in front of Frank at the table. He asks for the price of the entire porcelain stack, shocking Brooke instantly. Frank gasps, warning Evan to step away from his deal, but Evan ignores him. Touching the plaque, he demands the whole lot with 0 stories or takebacks. The confused seller looks between them, sensing the tense change in the room. He blindly raises the price to $20,000, but Evan counters with 10. The seller wants 18, but Evan says 12 and points out the off-duty cop. He warns him about annoying paperwork. Brooke chimes in, saying she is off-duty. But her cop face is not. The seller takes the $12,000 incredibly fast. Frank clutches his chest, groaning that Evan buying fast always means bad news. Later, Brooke approaches him as the crowded market grows quiet around them. She claims the piece belongs to her grandfather, but Evan says it belonged. Markets eat families, he laughs. Angered, she warns him not to play games. He tells her to call Victor Calder and offer him a massive moral discount. Annoyed enough to arrest his entire personality, she finally makes the call. Victor only heard Brooke's side of the antique market drama. A missing blue edge plaque. Yes, Evan bought it first. Her eyes snapped to him. Good, let Victor think Evan was greedy. If Victor wanted saints, he would never shop. In antique markets, the call lasted just 20 seconds before Brooke lowered her phone. She announced Victor was sending payment authority. That sounded boring. How much? 1.1 million. Frank instantly dropped onto a nearby wooden crate. The seller who took Evan's $12,000 gasped like his soul was leaving. Brooke glared fiercely. He bought her family's piece for $12,000 and was selling it back for $1.1 million. Just same-day history delivery, Evan replied. Brooke accused him of robbery. He simply stopped the slow market theft and billed extra. she remained furious. Yet a reluctant, violent kind of respect mixed into her anger. She hated that he saved the heirloom, but hated his profit even more. Evan's phone buzzed. Success. $1.1 million was deposited. The previous transfer felt huge, but this felt like real, solid ground under him. Frank whispered that he needed a new religion. Evan suggested retail honesty instead. His partner grumbled, but around them, the market's entire atmosphere suddenly shifted. Selling one compass, luck, turning chipped porcelain into millions, terrifying. They watched Evan make a 7-figure flip in minutes, shocking. Right on cue, Kendra Stone marched in, absolutely hating his success. Wearing dark glasses, she treated humiliation like a temporary accounting problem. Her sharp eyes locked onto the porcelain Brooke and finally his phone. Evan Rowe, Kendra said coolly. She expected him to shop for a suit. He was until her future apology budget arrived in his account. Brooke warned them not to start. Kendra smiled with old, familiar contempt. She teased Brooke about hiring an officer for family recovery services. Brooke dryly noted that even Evan did not realize he was doing that. Evan joked he was adaptive. Kendra slipped her glasses off, handing them away. Her quiet assistant was essentially a coat rack with shoes, barely human. Evan didn't even care. Kendra scanned the market and spoke loudly. She declared she would double the price of anything Evan touched today. Talk about a massive power play. Frank jumped up, knocking his crate over. Evan teased that she was copying his homework after he already turned it in. No, she snapped. She was teaching him what rude money can actually do. System check, 94% chance Kendra would outbid him on any interest. An 87% chance she followed gestures instead of actual, genuine value. With a 76% referral chance, Evan walked up to a cracked mirror. The silver mirror showed a flat 0% value. Interesting, he said. Kendra pointed, claiming it immediately. The vendor's eyes nearly popped. 1,200 doubled. Evan put the mirror down, picking up a fake jade bowl with a 1% survival rate. She claimed that too. Frank stared in utter confusion, but Evan just mouthed. Just watch. For 12 minutes, Evan walked the market like a starving man. He was at a poison buffet, and Kendra insisted on eating first. Brushing worthless lamps, dead coins, fake bowls, and chipped brass figurines. Even a hideous painting received absolutely zero value until Evan finally walked away. He asked if fire would improve it. Kendra bought absolutely everything, not because she wanted it, but because she was desperate for the market to watch her take choices away from him. The vendors, however, saw something else. They saw Kendra Stone pay rich person revenge prices for inventory that had not moved in months. One by one, they started slipping him quiet nods, a folded stack of bills. Under a receipt or a thank you discount on an object he did not buy, a whispered tip to point at the blue vase next. Kendra's smile held until Frank ruined it. Frank leaned over his table and yelled out, "Kid, if you can make her buy my broken umbrella stand, I will forgive the compass." Kendra froze. The market froze with her. Evan slowly picked up the stand. It was no umbrella stand, no, a delusional metal tube. Kendra's eyes moved from it straight to his face. For the first time that morning, she asked herself the right question. Too late. No, she whispered. Frank's face fell. Come on, be less emotionally healthy. The crowd laughed. Not huge, not fake. Enough. Kendra had spent thousands to control his hands, and the market figured out the trick. Before she did, talk about a backfire, her money funded his comedy. He set the umbrella stand down. Congratulations, Kendra. You bought everything he did not want. Her assistant stood behind her with bags in both hands and misery in both eyes. Kendra glared at the vendors, then at Brooke, then back to him. The rage did not explode, it sharpened. Enjoy the market, she warned, tonight you get a real audience. Her game changed right there. She stopped trying to beat him at tables he could choose. The next stage would be one she controlled. The Harbor Charity Gala was held in a hotel ballroom with chandeliers, security at every door, and enough perfume to kill a small plant. Evan arrived in a black suit he bought 2 hours earlier with money Kendra had accidentally helped him make. It fit well enough to annoy her. At the entrance, an auction staffer gave him a donor paddle and said guest contributions are checked backstage. He handed over the small brass lock plate he bought at the market for $40. The staffer looked at it. This is your contribution. It has personality. It also had a 71% chance of becoming useful on stage, which was the only personality he cared about. He saw Kendra across the ballroom. She lifted her glass toward him. Chance. Kendra altered his auction lot. 100%, he almost admired the honesty of that number. Nat texted him before the first charity speech ended, "Are you alive or rich dead?" He texted back, "Alive, rich people." Clap strangely, she messaged. Don't let Kendra make him look single and poor. One lie at a time, he put his phone away and found Brooke near the sidewall. She wore a dark dress instead of a badge, which somehow made her look more dangerous. Victor invited her, Brooke said before he could ask. He was about to say. She looked dangerous, but she warned he was about to get embarrassed. Everyone keeps promising him that the customer service here is amazing. The auctioneer took the stage. He was the only new person in the room who mattered, and even he mattered only because he had a microphone. Several lots sold quickly. Watch a signed guitar, a painting that looked expensive because nobody in the room wanted to admit it looked sad. Then the auctioneer smiled down at his card. Their next contribution comes from Mr. Evan Rowe. The room turned. Kendra's. A smug smirk appears over her glass. Staffers carry out a small velvet tray. His brass plate is gone. Now cheap plastic sits on it. A key tag shaped like a house, just a cheap retail gimmick. The kind people buy to look cheerful when their lives are clearly not. A sudden laugh echoes in the back. The room falls quiet again. The auctioneer hesitates. The card claims this first home is from Evan Rowe. Kendra smiles wider. The room instantly gets the joke. Nobody with quick money, who clearly does not belong in this crowd. Kendra turned his painful lockout into cheap party entertainment. Leaving now offers 12% chance of dignity. Taking the mic and telling the truth raises his odds to 83. He keeps it short. He steps on stage right away. Before the auctioneer can politely bury him, he explains the key. The man gladly hands him the mic. Evan holds up the plastic. Yesterday morning, he was locked out of his apartment for unpaid rent. Silence falls. Kendra's smirk instantly freezes. She wanted easy laughs, not serious attention. He shares a quick lesson. If someone locks you out, never spend your life begging at their door. He flips the tag in his fingers. This is no rare antique. It is a cheap house-key tag from a woman mocking his poverty. Tonight he is selling that exact punchline. A few people chuckle. This time they laugh with him. He points to the donor paddles. Bid on this tag for the housing fund. Make it expensive, he urges. Make them pay for that cheap laugh. Brooke glares at him. She hates how well this is working. The auctioneer quickly recovers. Opening bid 5,000. Paddles rise. Kendra lowers her glass. 10,000 jumps to 20, then 50. An older woman bids. She has a demanding voice, used to getting whatever she wants. She bids 100,000. The crowd claps, and Evan matches 10%. The donor asks if he can afford that. He confidently says yes. What about yesterday, she asks. No, he says, that is why he likes today. She bids again, sold for 120,000. The gavel strikes. The cheap tag is now the most expensive insult. Kendra tried to sell his humiliation, but he made someone else pay. This does not make him noble, just harder to dismiss. He steps off stage. Brooke immediately blocks his path. She calls it disgusting, but he counters that it was highly effective. His phone buzzes. Nina saw a photo and asks if he auctioned fake jewelry. He texts back that it was real homelessness with fake jewelry. She replies. She hates finding this attractive, a problem for a future therapist. Backstage, a staffer returns his original brass lock plate. It is in a clear bag. Someone switched the trays, they explain. They found it hidden under a prop table, smeared with black dust. Under the brass edge of the plate, a tiny stamp is hidden. It is a crude, dark, kiln-shaped mark pressed deep in the metal. Connected to the forged auction inventory at 79%. He did not recognize the mark yet, but he knew Kendra had not created it for party planning. Across the room, Kendra watched him notice the stamp. Her expression did not say guilt, it said annoyance that the joke left prints. Before he decided whether to confront her, Frank Russo called him. He answered, telling him if this was about the umbrella stand to grieve privately. Frank's voice came low and excited. Kid, he said. Big score, a real big old saber. Seller wants 80,000 and he can flip it before midnight. His stomach tightened. Send a photo, he told him. The image landed on his phone, a short old saber with a red jewel near the hilt, dark fittings dramatic enough to seduce exactly the kind of man who had sold him a compass for 900. Chance. Frank profits from buying this saber, 0%. Then the angle changed as Frank's thumb moved in the photo, and he saw the same crude kiln-shaped stamp hiding Under the jewel, Frank said he was reaching for the cash now. Do not touch. Your wallet, he warned. On the other end, Frank laughed, telling him to relax. He learned from last time. No, he had not. The fake saber's success rate dropped to 0. While Frank Russo reached for his wallet anyway, Frank Russo reached for his wallet like $80,000 was trying to escape without supervision. He ran out of the Harbor Charity Gala with a donor paddle still in his jacket pocket and called him. Again, Frank, he warned, if his hand touched cash before he got there, he would tell every vendor at Harbor City Antique Market that Frank needed a financial babysitter. He whispered away from the phone, asking for 5 minutes and his location. Market Lot, Westside. He snapped back, telling him not to say Westside like in a crime movie. Say who is with you. Frank hesitated. That hesitation told him enough. 2 guys, Frank said. One has the saber, and one has the face of a dentist who sells fake watches. Perfect, he sighed. Do not buy medical jewelry. Frank insisted it looked real, so did. Your confidence, he heard Frank curse before the call cut. Chance Frank buys. Before he arrives, 64%. Chance yelling delays him, 32%. Chance insulting his pride delays him, 81%. He called back and said the cruelest, most useful thing he could. Frank, if this goes bad, the market will say you sold him the compass. Watched him make millions, then bought the first shiny knife that winked at you. Silence. Then Frank said he hated him. Good, he thought. Hate is cheaper than 80,000. He stayed on the phone until he reached the market lot. The gala lights were still behind him when he saw him under a flickering parking lamp. Frank stood beside 2 sellers near a folding case. The saber lay on dark cloth, red jewel near the hilt. Metal polished just enough to flatter a desperate buyer. The taller seller looked him up and down, asking if this was his accountant. Worse, Frank said, his curse. He stepped closer. Chance this saber is genuine, 0%. Chance visible proof. Appears if the red jewel is not loose, 92%. Chance sellers become violent if cornered, 58%. Run if publicly embarrassed, 74%. The market lot was not crowded, but a few vendors were loading trucks nearby. Public enough, not safe, but useful. He raised his voice. 80,000 for this. The shorter seller snapped the case halfway shut, telling him if he did not know what he was looking at. Step back. Frank flinched. The line hit because it sounded too much like what he used to say. The taller seller smiled at him, saying his friend was nervous because he missed his chance. No, he replied, he was nervous because Frank learns slowly, and you two look like homework, he warns. The shorter seller's face tightens. Good, he says, this is a private sale. Then stop doing it under a giant parking lamp, Frank mutters back. Kid, he says, pointing at the red jewel near the saber hilt. That stone is hiding what you do not want him to see, he warns. He laughs, betting 10 times their asking price that they cannot afford it. Frank grunts and the seller stops smiling. The protagonist takes a step closer. If the saber is real after he touches it, he pays 800,000. If it is fake, you return his deposit and run before the market gets ugly. Frank whispers deposit. The protagonist just stares at him. Frank looks away. Only $5,000. That is how gamblers apologize. The taller seller pulls the case closer. No one touches it, he warns. Then no one buys it, he says. Frank, walk, that does it. The shorter seller thrusts the saber forward. Fine, touch it. You pay if you are wrong. He does not grab the blade. Instead, he slips a cheap coin from Frank's pocket. He flicks it straight against the red jewel. The fake gem instantly pops loose. It hits the pavement, bounces once, and rolls right under Frank's shoe. Underneath, a tiny black, kiln-shaped mark is stamped right into the metal. Fresh, modern, and ugly as a confession, a vendor gasps, Black Kiln. Those words land incredibly hard. He does not know the Black Kiln Syndicate yet. Not really, but the market knows that name like people know smoke means fire. The taller seller grabs the case. Frank steps firmly on the loose jewel. My deposit, Frank demands. For once in his life, he actually sounds dangerous. The shorter seller throws an envelope at him. Keep it, they shout, then run. Frank wants to chase them, but the nearby vendors burst out laughing. The fake saber lies on the pavement, looking like a cheap magic trick. Suddenly, it looks less like a treasure and more like a ruined magic trick. Everyone nearby can see the mark. Nobody needs a report to know the sale is dead. Frank's big score turns into public humiliation with one single, sharp tap. Do not, he warns. They tried to rob you, but you basically volunteered. Frank points at the fake. I was negotiating, he lies. You were bleeding cash. The vendors laugh even louder. Frank's ears turn red, but he stays quiet. He picks up the envelope, counting his cash to save some dignity. You saved me, Frank mutters. The protagonist grins, telling him to say it louder. Absolutely not, Frank snaps. Then pay up, he replies. Frank just glares. I like you less than the forgers, Frank says. That is partnership material. We are not partners, he replies. Real partners actually split the profits. You still sell treasure for lunch money. That insult hits Frank hard. Frank looks at the fake saber, then at the laughing crowd. His pride crumbles. But Frank Russo cannot feel shame without trying to make money off it. Instead, he points toward his van, claiming he has something else to show him. If there is a jewel, I will hit you with it, the protagonist warns. No jewel, Frank promises, just an old, heavy double sword from a storage lot. Frank claims there is an 89% chance Victor Calder pays millions for it. The protagonist stares at Frank with the calm face of a man avoiding a funeral smile. Calling it ugly, Frank narrows his eyes and asks why Evan's voice changed. He says he is just emotionally invested in Frank's bad taste. Frank opens the van. Dragging out a wrapped shape, Frank pulls back the cloth, revealing a dull sword. It looks twice as tired as any fake saber, 2 blades in 1 scabbard. Dark metal, plain grip, no red jewel, and 0 drama. Frank watches Evan's face. Watching a sandwich, this is exactly where the mind games get real. Excited eyes mean a 99% chance Frank hoards the sword for himself. If he acts bored, a 73% chance Frank gives it up. A quiet, real-looking object sits inside his van. While Frank chases shiny bait, it is poetic, but Evan hates poetry. Real-looking or not, Evan offers to take it before it becomes a parking cone. Frank clutches the cloth. No way. If your eyes got weird, I am keeping it. Evan tells him to keep it and sell it tomorrow for $200. Frank flinches. Evan walks. Frank begs him to wait, calling him kid. Evan waves, enjoy the heavy umbrella. Then Frank shouts 5,000. An 86% chance Frank regrets this within 1 hour. Too fast, no takebacks. Evan turns back. Done. Frank's face collapses. Frank hates that phrase. Evan transfers 5,000. Frank hands it over. Frank hands over the wrapped double sword carefully, like passing a sleeping snake. Frank warns him not to say if it is worth more than his van. Evan quips that his van is worth less than sandwiches, leaving Frank speechless. Evan really should have gone to sleep after being locked out by his girlfriend. He was interrogated by Brooke, lured into Kendra's trap, and called porcelain. He had auctioned a plastic tag and stopped Frank from buying a fake. Instead of resting, Evan decides to call Victor, who answers on the second ring. Recognizing Evan's voice, Victor notes the late hour but goes silent, hearing of a double sword. Victor demands a description, and Evan details the plain grip and dull twin blades. It makes Frank look sad, so Victor commands him to bring it to Calder Gallery. Hearing that name from 2 feet away, Frank nearly swallows his own tongue in shock. Evan teases Frank, reminding him that he did not want to know the sword's value. Frank follows anyway, and they soon arrive at the upscale Calder Gallery and Vault. Not a place entered by accident, it features white walls and soft lighting. The elite staff here can easily detect cheap shoes straight through concrete floors. The massive vault door in the back hall looks more like an absolute final answer. Victor meets them in a sharp charcoal coat, completely serious and wearing no smile. Brooke is there too, her arms crossed with the look of a deeply annoyed woman. She hates watching Evan profit from her family again. Frank nervously asks about the officer. Evan jokes that his life simply has themes. Meanwhile, Victor silently demands the weapon. Evan hands it over. Victor does not gasp, because old men like him never do. Instead, they grow dangerously quiet. Victor carefully begins to unwrap the double sword. Inspecting it under a table light, he checks every seam and the balance point. Testing the twin blades is enough. Frank leans in close, waiting anxiously. Victor looks up, asking where he got it. Evan points directly at trembling Frank. Frank whispers landfill, begging Evan to stop helping as Victor stares him down. Victor asks if Frank sold this, to which Frank sheepishly claims it was temporary. 5,000 permanently and no takebacks. Brooke closes her eyes as if in actual pain. Victor sets the sword down, calmly offering $3.8 million. Frank is stunned. Frank grabs the table edge. The room does not need a crowd because his face says it all. His face does all the public work. 3.8, Frank stammers slowly, million. Victor looks at him. Dollars our main character adds, knowing the unit. Frank snaps and sits down. He sits, then instantly stands back up. Hold on, Frank demands, trying to think. Claims of emotional distress fly, but but our protagonist calls it pure greed instead. Same organ, really. Brooke stares between them. You bought this from him for only 5,000. The price was named fairly, the young man answers. Frank points a finger, accusing him. His pain had a cash app. Victor watches the exchange in absolute silence. That silence is worse than judgment. It feels like a cold measurement neither of them wants. Frank turns to Victor, pleading that as the original owner, he deserves a seller correction fee. Victor calmly asks if Frank actually sold it. Frank's mouth instantly tightens up. Legally, yes, Victor replies. That single, cold word completely takes the air out of Frank. The protagonist almost feels bad, but Frank did try to scam him with overpriced junk before. He stole back a compass, took cash, and bought a fake saber despite being warned not to. Frank is definitely not innocent. He is just useful, greedy, and maybe a little trainable. Those are not moral qualities. They are just highly profitable market assets. Staring at Frank, our protagonist tells him to stop chasing cheap frauds. Stop selling real treasures by accident and actually answer the phone when called. Frank's eyes narrow. That sounds like employment, he says, or not dying broke. Brooke mutters that it is quite a strange motivational speech. She is new to management, after all. Frank should have stormed out, but he hesitates. Instead, he looks at the double sword, then at the fake saber case he brought by mistake. Finally, he looks at our protagonist. If we work together, he says, I am not fetching coffee. Good, he replies. Victor finally speaks, warning them not to confuse a profitable accident with partnership. Frank deflates, but our protagonist hears the shift. Victor is not warning Frank. He is warning him, the real target. He just turned a scammer's useless junk into a multi-million-dollar sale to keep climbing. He cannot just drag every loud man with a van into the vault. He nods at once, telling Victor to consider Frank a pending liability. Frank throws both hands up, complaining that he is right there. That is why his phone buzzes as Victor's assistant completes a massive transfer of funds. $3.8 million lands in his account, as if paying for damages. Frank stares blankly at the sword. The protagonist reassures him his van is safe. Frank covers his face with both hands. Victor does not laugh, studying him closely. Money buys objects, Victor remarks coldly, but it does not buy my confidence. Brooke mutters that for millions, she is completely fine renting emotional distance. That is not how respect works, Victor counters. Brooke says she was priced out yesterday. Victor's eyes sharpen. Earn some tonight, he challenges, leading them deeper inside. Deep inside the vault, the young man expects a boring lecture, but gets a trap. Victor stops in front of 3 glass display cases. One holds a bronze plate. Another holds a porcelain bowl, and the third is empty. Tell me which piece is lying. Frank whispers the empty one is cheating. Brooke tells him to be quiet. There is an 82% chance the bronze plate is completely misattributed. Valuable at 94%, 100% chance this empty display was Victor's real test. Those numbers were useful. The question was dangerous. Victor did not want a price list. He wanted to see if Evan would show off until he dug his own grave. He pointed at the bronze plate first. Wrong label, right age, wrong story. Victor did not move. Evan pointed at the bowl. Repaired, still worth keeping. Anyone who calls it ruined is trying to buy it cheap. Frank looked personally attacked. Then Evan pointed at the empty case. That is the lie. Brooke frowned, saying there is nothing in. Exactly, Evan replied. Victor did not bring him here to test whether he could read tags. He brought him here to see if he would pretend the empty case had a secret. Victor's mouth moved by 0.5 millimeter. To Evan, that was applause. Why stop at 3? Victor asked. Because if Evan kept performing, he would start sounding desperate. Desperate men are easy to buy. Victor looked at Brooke. Brooke looked annoyed, which meant Evan had accidentally helped himself. Victor reached into his coat and handed Evan a black card with Calder Gallery and Vault. Embossed in silver, no title, no speech, just a card heavy enough to feel like access. This gets you through my front door, Victor said. Not his trust progress, Evan said. Do not celebrate yet. The vault staff rolled in a tall sealed crate. The air around Victor changed, so did Brooke's face. Frank, who knew nothing about restraint, leaned toward Evan and whispered that the crate felt expensive. The staff opened it. Inside sat the Liberty Dragon vase. It was taller than Evan expected, white and blue with a raised dragon curling around the body, its glaze catching the vault light like water over bone. Even Evan, a man whose antique education had mostly been greed and terror, understood why people lowered their voices. Victor noted that the public insurance value was over Billion, that is some serious high-stakes money. Frank choked as Brooke went still, the staff. Watched the crate like it might hear disrespect. A blue number opened above. Vase, chance the Liberty Dragon vase destroys Evan Rowe if he challenges it. And cannot prove fraud, 97%. Then another line appeared under it. The Liberty Dragon vase is fake, 100%. Imagine the insane pressure. Victor asked if he would stake his name on that claim he was making. His throat went dry. The vase's value appeared first, then the 100% fake reading sat under it like a death sentence. Victor Calder did not ask Evan to appraise the Liberty Dragon vase. He asked if he was willing to destroy it. Curiosity let a man talk. Victor had handed Evan a billion-dollar object and waited for his knees to vote. The blue number stayed over the vase. Chance the Liberty Dragon vase is fake, 100%. Under it another line pulsed like it enjoyed his blood pressure. Chance visible proof peers through normal inspection, 0%. Frank Russo stood behind Evan, breathing like a man trying not to be financially near the vase. Kid, he whispered, say. He needed coffee. Brooke apparently heard him, scoffing that coffee will not make him smarter. It might make him quieter, Frank countered. Victor looked at Evan, not at them. You saw something, Victor noted. Evan did not answer fast enough. The vault door opened and a man in a navy suit walked in with the confidence of someone arriving to collect applause. Victor's voice cooled at the sight of Gerald Crane, the seller. Gerald Crane was handsome in a polished way. Expensive frauds loved to be handsome, with smooth hair, clean cuffs, and no wasted movement. He looked at Victor. First Brooke, then Frank, finally Evan. Gerald's smile immediately shifted. Gerald asked if this was the young man. Victor introduced him as Evan. Gerald stared at Evan's cheap suit. Frank muttered about the market story. Gerald completely ignored him, treating market folk like a walking disease. He addressed Mr. Calder. The Liberty Dragon vase was viewed by serious collectors. It was insured by serious money, handled by real professionals. If this new guest has a feeling, let him write it down in a diary. Brooke glanced at Evan, expecting a joke. Frank expected a total disaster. Victor wanted a choice. Evan looked at Gerald and said it was fake. Silence, absolute expensive silence, the kind that makes people sweat. Everyone began calculating which friendships could actually survive the next sentence. Gerald laughed. Repeat that if you know the insurance number. Evan stood his ground. The vase is fake. Gerald demanded proof. Victor did not step in to help. No warning, no rescue, absolutely nothing. He just stood by the crate, letting the tension slowly tighten around them. Gerald stepped closer. Every fraud accusation leaves a permanent mark. If you fail to prove this, I will personally ruin your reputation forever. You will never stand near a high-end gallery door ever again. Evan retorted that Gerald sounded like a man practicing his speeches in mirrors. Frank gasped behind him. Gerald's eyes sharpened. Break the vase then. Brooke looked on in shock. Gerald smiled, telling Evan to expose the hidden proof. If he was wrong, he would have to pay for a billion-dollar vase. That word hit like a brick. Homeless, he knew what they thought. Kendra had emailed that malicious joke last night. Gerald already knew it. Apparently, these ultra-wealthy elites passed poverty stories around like cheap seasoning. Evan calculated, 41% chance Gerald knew the prop was switched. 89% chance Gerald belonged to the forgery ring. That was not definitive proof, but the pressure was building rapidly. Victor finally spoke up. Touch the V7 and the choice is entirely yours. Brooke called out to her grandfather. Victor ignored her, watching Evan. A man must own his risk. Frank grabbed Evan's sleeve, begging him. Do not take this massive risk. Walk away or fake a phone call. Leaving meant an 8% chance of keeping Victor's respect. Chipping the inner base had a 67% chance of success. Striking the center had an 88% chance of absolute destruction. 2 days ago, Evan was completely broke. Now he dealt in millions. But the old fear of being locked out never truly vanished. If he walked away, these rich snobs would lock the door on him forever. Evan looked at Victor. Frank whispered that he was going to be sick. A nervous staff member brought a brass hammer and wrapped chisel. Gerald's smug smile returned. The small tools made Evan look foolish. But that was fine. Smug villains were always easier to trick. Evan approached the vase. Up close, the dragon detail was stunning. It made things worse. A fake does not always look cheap. Sometimes people choose to believe a lie because truth is expensive. Brooke steps near Calder and lowers her voice. If you are guessing, stop. He is Not guessing, what is he doing then, trying to be right where everyone can. Afford to hate him, her face changes, never soft, but she steps back. Calder sets the chisel against the lower base. The current angle reveals proof. Without shattering the wall, 62%, not enough. He shifts left 74. Gerald's voice slides over Calder's shoulder. Careful, the more you tap, the more it. Looks like fear. No, Calder says. Fear is when a seller keeps talking while a buyer holds a hammer. Victor's mouth twitches. Calder strikes. The sound is tiny. Too small, a thin chip snaps away from the underside base, skittering across the table. Nothing appears. For one bright, stupid second, his mind goes blank. No mark, no tag, no visible proof. Frank whispers, "Oh no." Jer inhales like a man tasting victory. Mr. Calder. Brooke moves toward the table. Victor raises one hand. He does not stop Gerald. He stops everyone else. The blue window flickers. A second strike at this angle destroys proof. 93%. A shallow side chip reveals the concealed firing tag. 81%, his first. Strike had not failed because system sight lied. It failed because his hand chose the safer-looking angle at the very last second. Cowardice has a wrist. Calder adjusts the chisel. Gerald's smile sharpens. Now he improvises. Now he corrects. Calder says. He strikes the side ridge, lighter than before. The base cracks. With a dry little pop, a sliver of glazed material falls away, and behind it, sealed inside the inner foot, sits a tiny firing tag. Dark modern kiln. Shaped the exact same ugly mark from the saber. The vault staffer nearest to Victor steps back. Brooke whispers, "Black kiln." Gerald stops. Smiling, the crack is small, but Gerald's face, losing its composure, is loud. Victor moves first, picking up the fallen sliver with a cloth, then leaning close enough to see the hidden tag. His expression barely changes, but his authority does. "Gerald," Victor says, "you brought black kiln work into my vault." Gerald's mouth opens. That tag was planted inside a sealed base. He protests, but Calder asks, "Did he touch it with a hammer, not a time machine?" Frank laughs. Gerald points at Calder. "He staged this. He knew where to hit. Because someone told him." Victor stares back. Is that really his defense? That market nobody had better access to the fake than he did. The words hit Gerald harder than the hammer hit the vase. Two CER staffers step toward him. Gerald backs up, begging Victor to listen. Victor's voice stays dead calm. "You are done." Using his first name, Brooke moves to the side door, blocking it without drawing attention. She does not need a uniform to make an escape look incredibly stupid. Gerald sees her and goes pale, claiming it is all a misunderstanding. "No," Calder says. "A misunderstanding is when Frank thinks storage trash is trash. This is straight-up fraud." With tailoring, Frank looks wounded. Why is he dragged into it? Because growth requires examples. Gerald suddenly lunges toward the table, not at Calder, but the broken base. Brooke catches his wrist before the staff can react. She twists once, clean and hard, sending Gerald face first over the table without touching the tag. Frank whispers that he likes her less when she is near him. Brooke holds Gerald down until security takes over. Finally, the vault breathes again. Victor does not celebrate. He looks at the broken vase, the hidden tag, then Calder, "You understand what you?" Brooke glared, demanding to know what he did. Victor told him he exposed a black kiln fake in his vault. This is not a market trick, but war. The word war should have terrified him more. Maybe it would have landed harder if Gerald was not pinned to a table, with Brooke gripping his wrist. Meanwhile, Frank looked like he was deciding if fear could be resold. The payoff was too loud, masking the danger for a single breath. Then his phone buzzed with another transfer. Victor had sent $2 million. The memo read hazard fee. Frank saw the alert and made a betrayed noise. Frank grumbled about breaking things for cash. He joked his services are expanding. Services. Victor handed him a new card with a direct number on the back. No assistant, no front desk. Victor told him that if Black Kiln arrived, call him first. Brooke released Gerald and looked at him. She disagreed, ordering him to call the police first. He asked which option gets him yelled at less. No, she replied, so he decided to compare response times. She looked ready to respond with something illegal. The guards dragged Gerald away. Gerald had stopped arguing, which frightened him more than the actual threats. Men who keep talking believe the room can save them. Those who go silent have moved the fight elsewhere. The vase broke once, his whole quiet life shattered with it. Victor warned him before he left Calder Gallery and Vault. Black Kiln does not just sell fakes, they protect roots, buyers, and reputations. Since he embarrassed a seller there, they would look for the easiest pressure point. Brooke declared that would be Frank, who immediately jerked Upright, demanding to know why he was the target. He looked at Frank. Brooke looked at him. Victor stared too. Frank pointed at them all, calling it profiling. Accuracy, Brooke replied. Frank stormed out ahead of him, acting too offended to show fear. Out in the parking lot, he turned and jabbed his finger at his chest, warning him not to smirk. He reminded Frank that he was no easy target, but he almost bought a fake saber under a street lamp. Frank claimed he had changed 19 minutes since, but Frank argued people grow fast under trauma. He tried to laugh, but his voice was thin, letting real fear slip through. Frank could joke about losing money all day, screaming about deposits and delivery vans, until the market lights went out. But Black Kiln was no ordinary bad customer. They had massive reach, and Frank was far too easy to find. He warned Frank to stay close, but Frank scoffed at the suggestion. He retorted that he just wanted Frank alive enough to keep complaining. Frank looked at him, and for a brief moment the comedy dropped before pride returned. Calling it touching, Frank insisted he was no easy target. Climbing inside and slamming the door, he should have stopped Frank right then and there. He should have split the sword profit right there, keeping him safe and close, until Victor's warning blew over. Instead, he let him drive away angry, because he was tired, rich, and arrogant enough to think danger needed an appointment. At the first red light, a heavy guilt caught up with him. Not clean guilt, but the logical kind. Frank sold him that double sword for $5,000 because he played Frank's pride like an instrument. Legally, it was his. Morally, Frank was a loud idiot who put that object in. 78% chance Frank becomes loyal if Evan offers him a share before he asks, and his chance of turning dangerous if he hears the sale amount from someone else. First is 84%. That second number is too high. Evan pulls into a gas station lot and opens his banking app. His thumb hovers over a transfer amount that would make yesterday's self faint. 300,000 not. Have not charity, a velvetrap leash. He types Frank before you start crying into your steering wheel. Answer your phone. I have your finder's share. He stares at the words, then adds, do not make this emotional. I dislike wet business. He sends it, but no read receipt appears. The probability that Frank reads the message safely within 5 minutes is 17%. Cold guilt grips him. He calls him. Silence. He dials again and the line clicks open. For half a second, in that brief moment, he hears road noise and Frank breathing hard, his voice saying, kid, if this is another joke, make it fast. Then another voice farther away orders him to pull over. The call goes dead. His hand tightens around the phone. He waits 8 minutes before the system updates. The probability that Frank Russ answers safely if called now is 11%. The number appears before he dials. His thumb freezes above the contact. He calls anyway. No answer. The system warns Frank is being followed. A 76% chance Frank survives if they wait for Brooke and Victor to coordinate versus 42% if he moves now. Keeping visual contact yields 68%. That is not heroic math. It is ugly math, the kind that does not tell you what is safe, only what is less shameful. He runs to his car. Frank's van is easy to find because subtlety hates the man. It rattles down the road toward the older warehouse edge of Harbor City, one taillight blinking like it has a nervous system. 2 black SUVs stay behind it. He calls Brooke, who answers, asking, what did you do? Frank is being followed. Her tone shifts. Where? South Warehouse Road. 2 SUVs. Do not engage. The probability that Frank is taken before Brooke reaches the road is 83%. He says it is too late for that. Line crackles as Frank's van swerves ahead of him. The first SUV cuts him off. The second blocks the lane behind him. Men get out fast. No speeches, no movie poses. They pull Frank from the driver's seat while he kicks, curses, and tries to bite one of them through a jacket. I did not buy the saber, Frank screams. One man punches him in the stomach. Evan's hands tighten on the steering wheel. The probability of him stopping them alone is 9%. The probability they kill Frank if he rams the SUV is 61%. Following the van gives 33%. Brooks' voice snaps through the phone, commanding him to talk. They have him. Do not follow them to a secondary location. Frank's survival rate if Evan loses the van is 18%. He is following, he says. Brooke curses, demanding his location and telling him to keep his distance. He sends it and drops the phone into the cup holder before fear makes him obedient. The men shove Frank into the back of the first SUV. His face turns toward the road for half a second. He sees Evan's car. Evan expects him to look relieved, but he looks furious. Of course he does. Frank Russo could be kidnapped by a forgery Ring and still blame Evan for the entire inconvenience. The SUVs drive toward a warehouse gate near the water where the streetlights thin out and the city starts pretending it has no cameras. He stays 2 turns. Back, a 44% chance he is spotted at this distance is too high. He slows. He kills his headlights for 3 seconds behind a parked truck, letting a delivery van pass. That leaves a 58% chance. It is a massive gamble. Up ahead, the SUVs turn through a chain-link gate, heading toward a dark, low-slung warehouse. A yellow bulb lights the side door. Frank kicks a kidnapper in the shin as they drag him out. The angry man strikes him right back. Evan watches, itching to make his move. An immediate rescue has only a 6% chance of success. Evan's body hates that number. His pride hates it even more, but his sight did not guide him here to die of ego. Men haul Frank inside. Behind them, the massive gate already begins sliding shut. Evan quietly rolls into the shadow of the truck, watching the gap narrow. His mind calculates the chances of a hidden side entrance staying open for 30 seconds. Only 21%. The odds Frank dies before help arrives are 39%. If he enters before it locks, the chance of finding a rescue route is 24%. He would survive, but barely. Tell me, would you take those odds? The gate closes. His sight shows a rescue route with incredibly thin odds. It is so fragile it feels like it could bleed out before he even reaches the door. The side door will stay open for 26 seconds, the chance he survives inside. Only 24%. It is insulting, but it is his only hope. Brooke is still on his phone, her sharp voice crackling from the cup holder. She snaps, Evan, do not go in there alone. Do you hear me? Evan whispers back, Frank is already inside alone. Brooke says that is exactly her point. He kills the engine, slips out of the car, and runs low through the truck's shadow. The door has a rusted handle, a yellow bulb, and a guard standing close by. Standing just 2 steps away, the guard has his back half-turned to the entrance. 61% chance the guard looks left in 5 seconds. Evan freezes. The guard turns left, 82% chance he looks right after inhaling his cigarette. Evan moves before the cigarette hits his lips. That is how his sight works best. Under panic, his sight does not offer courage, only timing, and timing is scheduled cowardice. He slips inside the moment the guard glances away. Perfect. Inside, it smells of wet concrete, old wood, and arrogant thugs. Dark metal shelves carve the space into narrow lanes. A dead forklift sits nearby. Beyond it, 3 thugs drag Frank toward a metal chair. The chair is bolted down. Frank is still fighting back, loudly. Frank yells that he keeps receipts as a man shoves him into the chair. Break a vendor, deal with the paperwork. The nearest thug slaps him. Frank blinks, looks highly offended, and remarks that it was not even his best hand. The man raises his fist again. The odds Frank takes a bad beating if Evan waits. 47%. The chance of crossing the open floor unseen is a miserable 13%. Creating a distraction with the fire panel has a 52% success rate. The chance the alarm pulls the outside patrol is 31%, too low. But panicking the kidnappers into splitting up sits at 64%. Ugly but useful, Evan pulls the handle, the alarm screams. The warehouse jumps, 2 men curse loudly and sprint toward the front office. A third thug grabs Frank's collar while the outside guard bursts back inside. The door almost hits Evan. He flattens himself behind a shelf. He smells the guard's cigarette. Brooke's voice hisses, what was that? The building hums. Evan is still alive, but that is a status update, not a plan. The guard moves past him. He slips across the next aisle, reaching Frank from behind the shelving. Frank's wrists are bound to the chair with heavy zip ties, and his lip is badly split. He glares at the protagonist, as if he personally invented kidnapping just to annoy him. Frank whispers that he came, but the reply is sharp, do not make it romantic, just untie him. Frank demands to be untied first, so the protagonist pulls a small box cutter from his pocket. The system shows a 71% chance of a clean cut. Hold still, he warns Frank. He cuts the first tie. A wincing Frank grumbles that he still owes him money. Sneaking into a warehouse of criminals apparently does not count as payment. Frank calls it pure drama. Slicing the second tie, the protagonist shoves his glowing phone screen right in front of Frank's face. The app shows the pending $300,000. Frank just stares. His eyes react first, immediately claiming that massive finder share as his own. It is still pending. He looks wounded again, complaining about a pending rescue. Stand up and it clears, he tells him. Frank leaps up as if grabbed by the spine. Suddenly, the alarm cuts off. the heavy silence makes the warehouse feel massive. A voice barks from the front office, ordering them to check the hostage. The system calculates a 22% chance of escaping through the side door. But the chance of Frank being their escape factor is a whopping 100%. The number glows over Frank's head so brightly it feels personal. He stares, and Frank stares back. Frank asks why he looks at him like expensive machinery. Simple, because he is. The first kidnapper rounds the shelf, spots the empty chair, and then sees them. He sees Frank standing free. The thug's confidence returns, sneering they picked the most. Dumbest place to be brave. Frank hides behind him, claiming he was only invited here by force. Two more men exit the front office. Meanwhile, the outside guard closes the side door, locking it with a metal bar. The real trap was never the ropes, nor the alarm. The biggest kidnapper points directly at him, Victor Calder's little market pet. He hates how deeply that insult stings, hitting his raw, unresolved wounds. The market jokes the suit he still wears like a costume. Tell Victor, the thug demands. Black Kilm does not lose face for free. The system calculates talking buys 10 seconds. Sure, he replies, asking if he should mention that 3 grown men needed zip ties. Just for Frank, Frank frantically whispers not to make them angry. The leader merely smiles. Frank Russell was just bait with a van, he sneers. Frank's face twitches in rage. The leader keeps gloating. He claims Frank broke one cheap, fake vase and thought he beat a whole syndicate, so they grabbed the loudest idiot nearby. And get this, as Frank's shoulders tense, the puzzle pieces finally click together. Frank is not their escape route because of bravery. He is their ticket out. Because his pride is incredibly explosive, he looks at Frank and agrees with the thugs. He tells Frank they are right about him being easy. Frank turns on him, deeply offended. He mocks Frank for letting 2 SUVs take him over an angry text message. The kidnappers laugh, but the protagonist presses on, revealing the worst part of all. That double sword actually sold for $3.8 million. Frank stops breathing. The laughter stops. Frank gasps, outraged that he only got a finder's share. A real partnership would have paid far more. Frank stands there speechless, completely frozen. He points at the thugs. Black Kilm always planned to use, scare, and dump him. They wanted him to die believing he had only lost some cheap, fake saber. Frank steps forward to shut him up. He moves first, but not like a trained fighter, more like a heavy vending machine falling down concrete stairs. Deciding to keep rolling, his massive shoulders slam into the first guy, sending him flying back into a metal shelf. Talk about a brutal hit, but Frank does not stop. He grabs the second guy by his jacket, shoving him into a nearby forklift hard enough to move the dead machine 2 inches. 3.8 million, Frank screams. The outside guard lunges for him. Mark strikes the guard's hand with a box cutter, ducking under his arm, kicking his knee hard. It is not graceful, but it works. Chance the door opens. If the bar is lifted is 89%. Frank door. Frank has the big man halfway over a pallet. Mark is busy uncovering betrayal near the exit. Suddenly, the big man punches Frank straight the ribs. Frank wheezes, grabs his shirt, and delivers a brutal headbutt with the technique of a guy who was never trained, but never let that stop him. The sound is awful, but the result is beautiful. The big man drops to one knee. Frank staggers, points at Mark, shouting that Mark owes him interest. Survive the principal first, Frank yells. Mark lifts the metal bar. Behind him, one of the men grabs his jacket and yanks him backward. Chance Brooke arrives in under 2 minutes is 66%. Chance he lasts if held is 11%. Frank sees him grab Mark and something in his face changes again. The greed does not disappear. That would have been suspicious, but now it has company. Frank calls out, breathing hard. The man holding Mark turns. Frank picks up a plastic crate and smashes it over his head. The man lets go. Frank grabs Mark's collar and shoves him through the door before he can even thank him. Move, Mark. They spill into the lot. The outside guard is coming back from the front gate. He sees them, sees Frank's bloody face, and hesitates just long enough for Frank to point at him. Frank says he has had a difficult evening. The guard wisely steps aside. They run, but not far. Frank's legs give out halfway across the gravel. He catches himself on the hood of Mark's car, cursing so hard the warehouse light should have dimmed, trying to pretend he actually chose that posture. Strategic pause, he wheezes. Chance Frank reaches the passenger seat is 18%. Chance Mark drags him and gets tackled from behind is 72%. The door bangs open. Again, the biggest kidnapper staggers into the lot with blood under his nose and pure murder in his eyes. Behind him, 2 others rush out fast enough to make the Grapple jump, the big man orders them back inside. Frank looks at Mark, who dislikes his customer service. The big man pulls a knife from his belt, not a dramatic blade but a cheap warehouse knife, ugly and close. Chance he grabs Frank before Brooke arrives is 69%. Disarming him is 14%. Chance chain link. Gate buys time if jammed is 77%. The open gate has a loose drag chain. Hanging from the post, Mark sees the number and moves before having a full plan, which is becoming his unfortunate style. He orders Frank left, who asks which left. Just move, Mark snaps, grabbing the chain to throw it around the gate handle as the big man lunges. The chain slips because of course it does. Chance Frank kicks. Gate at the right angle is 83%. Kick it. Frank stares at the knife, then at the gate and finally at Mark. For once, greed is not enough. Fear has him by the throat. Mark says to do the ugliest thing that works, warning if they get taken back. Inside, Evan cancels the wire transfer. Frank's eyes flare with holy rage, warning him not to dare try this from captivity. Frank kicks the gate, slamming the heavy metal panel hard. It strikes the big man's arm, sending the knife flying. Evan yanks the chain again. This time it holds. The giant slams chest first into the gate and bounces off hard. The impact makes Evan's entire weak. Frank grabs his sleeve, pulling him backward out of danger. Frank says he saved Evan's cheap life. Evan notes he motivated his expensive foot. Partnerships need clear boundaries. The other men start moving around the gate instead. Detective Brooke arrives before they can reach them. 58% not good. Then sirens. Sirens pierce the warehouse lot. Brooke's car roars in as they reach their vehicle. 2 county police cruisers follow her through the gate as she gets out. Her hand is on her weapon, eyes cold with fury. Get down, Brooke screams. Evan hits the dirt immediately. Frank drops much slower, whining about his injured ribs. Whining that his bones are a legal matter, the kidnappers burst out and freeze. Staring straight at Brooke and the police cruisers, their tough guy act instantly evaporates. Thugs who beat bound hostages suddenly remember their names and rights. They have fragile wrists too. Brooke slams the biggest threat face down. He is pinned to the concrete before he can request a lawyer. Frank watches. Frank wheezes on the ground, claiming he helped. Brooke cuffs the suspect and glares. Bleeding on my scene, she sighs, calling him Bill Evan as he corrects her. Brooke glares, accusing him of disobeying. He reminds her she is not his boss. Keep talking and I will be, she warns. Frank raises a finger from the dirt. For the record, Frank says, Evan did rescue me. Brooke stares down at him. Frank lowers his hand. The warehouse lot quickly fills up with flashing police lights. Even with sirens blaring, Evan refuses to let the chaotic police process distract him. The essential work is done. Frank is breathing, and the kidnappers lost their leverage. A syndicate called Black Kiln failed to make their terror stick tonight. Brooke steps closer. She leans in close while officers swarm the area, whispering that one day he will explain. He must explain how he always finds the one impossible route that somehow works. Today, they are going to Lakeshore Medical Center before Frank dies of pure drama. Whining from the pavement, Frank insists his pain is real. Brooke calls it theatrical. At Lakeshore Medical Center, Frank finally receives his bandages and some heavy pain medication. He also gets an audience he does not deserve, lounging dramatically in his bed. With gauze under his eye and tape securing his ribs, he tightly clutches his phone. Nurse instructs him to rest. Frank nods solemnly, waiting impatiently for her to leave. He whispers to send it, calling his lack of money a worse pain. Evan transfers $300,000, and Frank stares blankly at his screen. The glowing numbers reflect in his eyes like stained glass, and then he starts. Crying tears of pure profit, he whispers that Evan is a cheap devil. Frank only gets $300,000 from nearly $4 million. Evan also risked the warehouse, but Frank complains about him discounting his trauma. Sitting nearby, Evan suggests earning cuts cleanly. Frank asks what clean means. It means no scamming, no selling fakes, and no hiding potential leads. No hiding information out of fear. They find targets together and split the profits. Frank brings market access. Evan brings calculation, splitting everything 50-50. When asked about objects he already owns, Evan doubts they are genuine. An accident, he points his phone at Evan, demanding a discovery fee. Cruel and efficient, Frank looks at the bank transfer, his tough face softening in an unusual way. He would deny this under oath. You came before the money even cleared, he says. The money was bait, he swallows. You came before I even knew there was bait. Frank Russo just thanked Evan without hurting his brand. Evan lets him have that moment. Just 1 second, then Evan's phone buzzes, so does Frank's. Frank looks first. Greed makes him fast, his face twists. Oh, this is filthy, he groans. He turns the screen toward Evan. The dirty rumor is already spreading like wildfire through their chats. It claims Frank Russo and Evan Rowe staged the vase break. Victor Calder paid them hush money after planting a black kiln mark. Avoid buying from either seller. No signature, none is needed. That first attack used raw fists. The second attack targets reputation, a weapon that destroys careers instantly. Deals plunge 91% within 24 hours. Denials change nothing. 6%, North Pier Night Market remains their only hope. 63%, Frank reads those silent calculations on Evan's face. We are going. Evan protests his hospital injuries. Then just get me pants, Frank demands. Brooke stands in the doorway with her arms crossed. She has already heard quite everything. Her sharp expression says she is thoroughly annoyed by their sheer stupidity. No, Brooke says. Frank points at his phone. They are killing me. Socially, Brooke counters that physical death is worse. This is worse for business. Brooke looks at Evan, warning him not to encourage this. Evan reads the post. The warehouse made Frank his partner. This smear is trying to destroy that partnership before it even begins. Still, Frank is greedy and surprisingly loyal. He fights for cash but stands with Evan when it matters. Evan stands up. Brooke insists they are not investigating rumors. Evan counters, we are going. Straight where it hurts, Frank tries to climb out of bed, groaning instantly. He sounds like a broken accordion. Brooke closes her eyes. 2 hours later. Defying doctors, police, and all common sense, they arrive at the market. Frank limps beside Evan under the bright lights of North Pier Night Market. He has one arm wrapped around his ribs, a cap pulled low, and the burning fury of a man whose entire customer base just ghosted him. At the first stall, Frank slaps cash down. The vendor looks at the money, stares at Frank, then looks away. At the next stall, the owner flips his sign to closed right as they stand there. At the third, a woman who used to beg Frank for leftovers suddenly finds the floor extremely fascinating. Frank's face freezes. Every single seller who once chased his cash refuses to meet his eyes. The night market does not reject them loudly at all. Loud rejection would be easier, giving you something to fight, mock, or even overpay. This is quieter, meaner. See how every single vendor just looks away. They avoid Evan, looking away as if his ruined reputation is highly contagious. Frank slaps cash on the next table anyway. The seller pulls a tray of old watches back with 2 fingers. Not tonight, he says. Frank stares. But I have money, Frank insists. The seller whispers that is the problem. No one gasps, no one needs to. The smear worked perfectly before they even arrived. The black kiln did not just kidnap Frank, they erased him. Radioactive, explaining themselves, only had a 4% chance of working. A public win would reverse opinions by 67%. Markets respected. Profit, not innocence. Evan leaned toward Frank, whispering they needed a public target. Frank grumbled about being bait while Evan kept denying promotions. Evan just told him to wear sunglasses, making Frank look deeply offended. He claimed they were medical, but Evan knew they came from a gas station. Frank shrugged, pulling down the glasses and a stolen hospital cap. The makeshift disguise actually made him look less like an active fugitive. Instead, he looked like a guy avoiding his ex at a mall. Perfect. They moved deeper into the market, where North Pier proved different from Harbor City. Harbor City sold goods under daylight and lies, but North Pier sold old things under glowing string lights, steam from food carts, and a whisper. Network capable of ruining anyone by midnight. A small crowd followed them at a careful distance. Good, let them pretend to ignore them. Frank stopped at a stall run by an older merchant with incredibly sharp, calculating eyes. On the table lay brass locks, ancient coins, cracked frames, and a mysterious square wooden mechanism box about the size of a lunchbox. It was remarkably ugly. Ugly helped, pretty items drew rich amateurs, while ugly things attracted those who thought they were clever. Evan's favorite prey, the system calculated the box had an 88% chance of making over $5,000. Evan asked the system if the peak value exceeded $200,000. A 42% chance meant it was perfect for a public show. Frank picked up the wooden box, acting like he had absolutely no idea what he was doing. How much, he asked, deepening his voice. The older seller glared. He looked at Frank's bandages and dryly declared the shop was closed. Frank lowered his sunglasses, loudly asking if he even looked like Frank Russo. The seller joked he did, with a head injury, prompting Evan to step in. He had to stop Frank from buying useless junk out of spite, the box. The merchant smiled coldly, noting how brave they were for showing up. Evan joked he paid for his face, while Frank was on a payment plan. The crowd chuckled weakly, unsure if laughing with them was still safe. Evan slapped $80 on the table for the box, but the seller hesitated. Suddenly, a voice behind them warned not to sell. Marcus Pike appeared. He walked through like the market, had been waiting for his permission to breathe. Marcus was broad, neat, and exuded a quiet, extremely dangerous confidence. Unlike Frank or Gerald Crane, he looked like he could break bones easily. He could appraise an antique or snap a wrist without blinking. The vendor straightened up, greeting Marcus with immediate respect. Marcus looked at Frank first, telling him he belonged in a hospital. Frank offered a weak joke about gifts, but Marcus ignored him, eyeing Evan. He addressed Evan as the guy who broke a famous vase for quick cash. Evan countered, asking if he should have waited for the dust to settle. Marcus explained that half the market suspected Evan and Frank of a scam. Inside Victor Calder's vase, and there it is, the perfect moment for drama. The system showed a 29% chance Marcus fully believed the rumor. Testing the crowd's reaction, 74% chance Marcus is connected to the Whitlock estate. 81%, that last number lands like a cold hand on his neck. Marcus picks up the wooden box before he can stop him. Turning it once, Marcus presses his thumb. Under the side lip and a narrow inner drawer clicks open. The crowd makes a real sound this time. The older vendor mutters that he never knew it opened while Marcus looks back at him. Neither did he. Frank stops fidgeting, which hurts worse than the crowd. Frank believed in his numbers because they always made him money. Seeing someone else beat him to the prize makes his partner's face go careful. A total miss, 100% chance his reading overlooked a hidden structure. Rude. Educational though, Marcus holds up the inner drawer. Inside lies a thin strip of tarnished metal and a folded scrap of old cloth. No treasure, just enough to prove Marcus found a layer he missed. Marcus quietly says his question was shallow, speaking in a low tone that makes it worse. Loud men only want attention. Quiet, competent men can actually strip away your status. The older vendor smirks, suggesting the vase is shallow too. The crowd shifts. The black kiln had spread the rumor and Marcus has shown teeth. 12% chance bluffing restores the crowd. 58% chance if he admits the miss. He hates honest numbers. He looks at Marcus, admitting he is right and missed the box. Frank's head snaps toward him, telling the kid to be quiet. The crowd loves the drama. No humility here, they just smell blood. Marcus sets the box down, walking away. Marcus claims he admitted defeat, but he counters that he only asked a lazy question. His eyes change. Good. Competent rivals hate being bored. If he cannot outstat him yet, he can still spark his curiosity. He places his hand on the box. Without opening the drawer further, chance this object contains a second hidden compartment. 79%. Forcing destroys value at 92%. Chance. Correct sequence taking 3 moves is 68%. All he needs, 3 moves, no explanation. He flips the box upside down. The crowd laughs again. Thinking he is panicking, Marcus does not laugh. Move 1, he slides the inner drawer halfway out, then pushes it back until it clicks once, not twice. Chance sequence remains viable is 74%. Move 2, he presses the brass corner that looks repaired. Nothing happens. The older vendor snorts in amusement. Brilliant. Chance pressing the opposite corner is 81%. Move 3, pressing the opposite corner with his thumb, turning the bottom panel with 2 fingers. The penny shifts. A seam opens where none had been. Frank whispers for it to please be expensive. For once, he spiritually agrees with the man. Inside the second compartment sits a small jade eagle token wrapped in dark cloth. The market goes silent for a better reason. Jade carries weight in these circles, but this is not about the material. The eagle shape is clean, old, and severe, with one tiny scratch across the wing that looks accidental until the system's sight lights it up. 100% chance Marcus Pike recognizes the Jade Eagle token. His face confirms it before the number fades. Frank points weakly, asking if this silence is good. Silence. The older vendor reaches for the token, but Marcus catches his wrist. With a warning not to touch it, the older vendor's smug smirk instantly dies. This shifts the crowd's energy completely. A hidden token is interesting, sure, but Marcus Pike protecting it makes it valuable. A man standing near the food. A man by the cart yells they could have easily planted the item. The crowd loves the accusation. It keeps them suspicious. Drama, they wanted it. Frank turns, wounded and furious. Planted it when Frank retorts, between my kidnapping and this trip. The guy shrugs, muttering that they move fast. Frank steps forward. The young man grabs his sleeve, warning him not to punch anyone. Marcus picks up the empty outer box, showing off the hidden channels. He opened the first layer, but the second layer was still sealed. That was before Evan even touched it. Now, the old vendor freezes. The young man stares at him, demanding he speak. The vendor blinks in confusion. Did he touch the box before paying? The vendor gulps under their gazes. The vendor admits he paid first. He confirms Frank did not touch it. No one else touched it, not a soul. The vendor's jaw tightens. This is not a legal deposition, but it is worse, public humiliation. He must admit the item left his stall clean, in front of everyone. And he has to do it while the treasure sits on the table. Silence. The heckler shuts up. Frank smiles, claiming he accepts the unspoken apology. The young man announces they are expanding services, looking back at the vendor. The vendor gulps. Frank leans in with a smug, highly annoying smile. They have cash ready. The vendor accepts $80, looking completely devastated by it. It feels like he just sold a mansion for the price of a cheap lunch. The crowd shifts instantly. Just 2 minutes ago, they wanted them ruined. Now phones are out and vendors crowd around. One claims he has a rare box. Another calls Frank a complicated but talented buyer, playing both sides. That is just market speak for regretting their choices. Frank happily soaks it in. Marcus does not care. He stares at the token, asking where he learned that sequence. The young man replies the box told him. Marcus retorts that boxes do not talk. Frank clutches his bandaged ribs, laughing that he actually missed this arrogant attitude. Sit down, Marcus tells him. Frank notes people keep saying that. Marcus warns the young man that he is either reckless, lucky, or worse. He replies he has been called worse today. Marcus insists it is no insult. Wait, the crowd parts again. This time, nobody is laughing. An older man in a plain dark coat steps forward, without jewelry or entourage. He carries the effortless authority of someone too wealthy to prove anything. Marcus steps aside respectfully, which speaks louder than any introduction ever could. There is a 96% chance this man is the legendary Lionel Whitlock. Only 2 days ago, he could not even imagine stepping past a gate like his. Lionel Whitlock looks closely at the Jade Eagle token, then shifts his gaze. He dryly points out that the young man almost lost. The protagonist simply agrees. Lionel likes that. Men who do not notice their losses are too easy to exploit. Frank mutters that he feels attacked by context. Lionel immediately looks his way. Recognizing Frank Russo, Lionel speaks. Frank straightens up, immediately regretting his sore ribs. Lionel heard he escaped medical care to buy antiques after being kidnapped. Frank pauses, admitting his life sounds deeply troubled when summarized by a stranger. Lionel looks back at the young man, noting the rumors claimed he staged the vase. Rumors are mostly lies, but markets still bleed for them. Lionel reached into his coat, slapped down a folded $100 bill right beside the Jade Eagle token. North Pier respects pocket money when it shuts up loud. Mouths. Lionel said, "You bought that box for 80, and I am buying your explanation for 100. The crowd leaned in. This was a raw test. Committee, just a public price tag. Lionel was giving the market away to chain sides without apologizing. Evan snatched the 100, handing it to the trembling vendor. The old man blinked. Evan called it a reputation tax for selling him the box after everyone warned him not to. Frank looked utterly betrayed, asking why they were rewarding him because he took their cash in public, proving he has a spine. The older vendor stared hard at the bill, then up at the crowd. His shame dissolved into pride. Money is a shameless magician, he claimed he sold the box fair and square. That did it well almost. Markets do not shift in one breath, but the cold mood cracked. Voided gazes suddenly turned sharp and direct. The rumor had not vanished, but it lost its easiest teeth. One woman stepped forward with a velvet pouch, asking if Evan was still buying. Frank nearly choked. "Are selectively accepting apologies in the form of inventory," Frank muttered. Evan put a hand on his shoulder before Frank could turn this recovery into a cover charge. The odds of North Pier vendors trading with them again shot up to 72%. Not forgiveness, just raw access. Black Kilm had tried to block the market, but one ugly box kicked the door back open. Marcus stared at Evan with respect. "You could have kept that 100, Marcus said. Evan replied he just bought a Witness who hates him slightly less. Lionel let out a cold, sharp laugh of approval with teeth. Lionel said Victor told him Evan's eye was useful, but Marcus warned his mouth would get him killed. Honestly, both were true. Tomorrow morning, Lionel ordered him to Whitlock Estate. Bring the token and bring Frank if he can stay upright. Leave the market tricks outside his study. Frank whispered that a study sounded expensive. Lionel confirmed it was. Frank whispered again that he would stay upright. Lionel turned to leave, then stopped. Right beside Evan. One more thing, Evan Rowe. Evan hated how he said his full name. Old men with power used full names the way kidnappers used zip ties. If you flattered him tomorrow, Lionel warned he would know. Then he walked away. The crowd released the heavy breath it had borrowed. Marcus stayed behind, rapping the Jade Eagle token himself and handed it to Evan, warning him not to pocket it loose. That sounded caring, but it was just discussed with poor handling. Evan accepted his tenderness. Frank groaned, begging him not to flirt with the man who could fold. Then Marcus ignored him, warning him to be careful. Lion Whitlock does not test objects first. When asked what he tests instead, Marcus looked directly at Evan. People. That answer followed Evan out of the night market harder than any rumor had followed him in. Still, the hidden token cleared enough of their status to keep trading alive. Marcus had yielded in public, and Lionel Whitlock had summoned Evan by name. He had gone to the market to survive a smear, but left with an invitation from a man who could make that smear look like a parking ticket. The next morning, Frank arrived at Evan's car wearing a clean shirt, dark glasses, and he wears the anxious look of a patient escaping medical supervision for the second time. He warns his companion not to mock his posture, which is currently negotiating with gravity. Ever since the warehouse, gravity has been hostile. Now they drive through the gates of Whitlock Estate just after 9 p.m. He smells deep wealth before even seeing the house. Talk about serious wealth. The road is incredibly smooth and the trees look tired. The gate opens like it trained to be completely unimpressed. Marcus waits right there, alongside a gray and white blur. Rocket the husky shoots across the driveway, hitting the grass, changing direction for no reason, and barreling straight toward him like he owes him rent. He barely gets the car door open before the husky shoves his head into his stomach. Frank stares, asking why the wealthy dog knows him. Suddenly, Tessa Whitlock's voice floats from the steps, warning Rocket to stop attacking guests before her grandfather starts judging them. He looks from the husky to Tessa to the estate. Behind her, his system's probability window does not even need to appear. Rocket runs through the gate like he owns him as well. Tessa Whitlock stands on the front steps in a cozy sweater, holding a coffee cup and looking as though the massive mansion behind her is nothing but a giant background prop for her dog. Rocket has muddy paws on his coat while Frank stands jaw-dropped. Marcus Pike looks like a man already deeply regretting his entire guest list. He looks at Tessa, asking if she lives here. She shrugs, admitting her grandfather says she treats the estate like a charging station. Frank whispers those words, stunned. Tessa notices his bandages and asks if he is okay. Frank immediately straightens, claiming he survived market violence. Our guy reveals the kidnapping, making Tessa blink. Tessa admits that is worse. Frank feels deeply touched by her bare minimum concern. When he first met Tessa, she was just a careless girl with an expensive husky and casual remarks that made his broke brain itch. He thought Rocket was just a bizarre system reward, completely unaware the dog was a breadcrumb trail leading straight into one of the wealthiest antique families in Harbor City. But there is no time to reflect as Rocket still presses muddy paws into his coat. Marcus finally snaps his fingers. Rocket completely ignores him. Tessa snaps once and the dog sits instantly. Frank smiles. That has to hurt. Marcus briefly orders them to walk and they enter. The estate does not show off like Kendra Stone. Her money wants witnesses, but Lionel's wealth seems to have long stopped caring who believes in it. The entry hall has cold stone floors, silent staff, ancient wood, and paintings that discourage breathing. Near them, the system calculates that the cheapest visible item here easily exceeds his old annual rent with 100% certainty. Meanwhile, Tessa walks alongside him, casually revealing a massive connection. She says her grandfather is cranky after the North Pier incident because Marcus called our protagonist interesting. Marcus does not look back, clarifying he actually said difficult. Tessa replies that her grandfather likes difficult men and calls boring ones expensive dust. Frank warns him against becoming dust. Soon, they reach a pair of massive double doors at the Back of the hall, Marcus pauses with his hand on the handle, warning them to answer Lionel directly instead of putting on a show for anyone. Frank immediately raises his hand, objecting to being grouped with the younger crowd. Marcus opens the doors. Lionel Whitlock's study is not a study, it is. This place was like a bookshelf ambush, with expensive relics covering every wall. There was a porcelain plaque over the fireplace and a bronze mirror by the window. Under glass sat a carved chest, with a narrow sword mounted over a locked cabinet. Below it sat small statues lit from underneath. The room was a collector's absolute dream. And an insurance agent's nightmare. Lionel stood by the fireplace, leaning on a cane. Victor Calder stood right beside him. Seeing Victor there changed the entire vibe. This was no simple, friendly visit. The two old masters had clearly compared notes. And our main character was the problem they had both decided to test. Victor nodded once. A tiny cold nod, no rescue and no warmth. These rich old men played tough. They made support feel like a locked door he had to open himself. Lionel stared. His gaze drifted to the wrapped jade eagle token, and Lionel told him to set it down. Lionel pointed toward a plain wooden table nearby, and he placed the token right there. Frank tried to hover too close, but Marcus grabbed his sleeve before he touched anything. Frank muttered that he was just observing, but Marcus told him to back away. Tessa quietly sat in a chair by the window, with Rocket resting at her feet. She looked curious rather than nervous, which told him she had seen this test before. She survived the sheer boredom of it, but he had no idea if he would. Lionel pointed his cane around the room, demanding he pick the most valuable piece. Simple question, deadly trap. Probability the plaque is real, 0%. Bronze mirror real, 0%. Carved chest real, 0%. The mounted sword, 0%. The small statues, also 0%. Those failure numbers flashed in his mind, making the study look like a massive prank. He stayed silent. Lionel's gaze sharpened, noting he was taking longer than before. Back at North Pier, the environment was at least honest enough to look cheap. Frank made a nervous warning noise, while Victor watched him without even blinking. Flattering Lionel kept his access at 62%, but lying would destroy future trust. A 96% risk. Telling the truth meant 88% danger. Great. His morning had really been missing a chance to get kicked out of a mansion. He looked at Lionel and said none of them. The study went dead silent. Tessa stopped petting Rocket. Frank closed his eyes, and Marcus shifted his hand slightly. Lionel repeated the claim that everything was fake, while Frank whispered he missed the hospital. Lionel's cane tapped sharply against the floor. He reminded our hero where he stood. Lionel pointed out he was a guest in his study. That was fully noted. Yet he was calling Lionel's life collection a total fake. Our hero just looked. He stared at the plaque, the mirror, the chest, the sword, and the statues. The blue windows stayed completely consistent. No, he said, this room is the fake. Marcus looked at him with genuine interest rather than anger. Lionel slowly stepped forward. The cane clicked heavily with each step, sounding less like support and more like a threat. Lionel called out to Victor, who admitted the kid had quite a mouse. He survived the worst because of it, though that was hardly an endorsement. Victor chuckled. It was more like a warning label. Lionel stopped right before him. He was too short to tower over him, so he used wealth and cold silence instead. He demanded a single real piece, but our hero refused to play along. The cane swung incredibly fast, slamming right against the table, inches from his hand. Frank jumped higher than anyone. Tessa tried to intervene, calling out to her grandfather. He avoids her gaze as Rocket growls softly, warning her to stay back. But the room is not in a laughing mood. Lionel leans in close to ask him. What happens to young men who insult collections they do not understand? They stop getting invited back or anywhere at all. The chance Lionel can ruin his elite antique access is 93%. Backing down keeps him safe is 71%, but that destroys his principle. Nomination path completely. He hates that 100% stat. The profitable answer and the truth are not the same thing for once. The profitable move would be to flatter him, naming the least fake object so the old man feels wise. The honest truth is the one that might get him hit with a cane. He chooses the cane. Everything here is fake, he says again. Lionel's face hardens as he demands why. The question has teeth. If he tries to explain like a professional, he will drown. In details he does not truly know. Hiding behind instinct makes him sound like a fraud. A quick, direct answer has a 64% chance of passing. He points at the Plaque over the fireplace, noting the wear is in the wrong places. Next, the bronze. Mirror is trying too hard to look buried. Then he looks at the sword, the grip. Has old dirt and new fear, Frank whispers. It has new fear. A cellar aged the handle more than the blade, Evan says. Lionel's eyes do not change. He stops. There, since going on, has an 82% chance of looking desperate. And the main reason, he says, is you wanted him to pick just one, if one were real. You would have let it sit quietly to see if he found it. This room is built to force cowards to flatter you. The cane lifts again. Marcus moves half a step. Victor stands still. Frank whispers to let just one statue be emotionally authentic. Suddenly Lionel strikes, not his head nor his ribs. The cane hits his shoulder. Hard enough to numb his arm, but not enough to leave a mark for a lawyer to exploit. The pain flares blinding white. A second strike if he changes his answer is 17%. Staying firm bumps it to 43%. The system really knows how to make truth feel negotiable. Lionel demands to know what is real in this room. Evan breathes through his teeth. He desperately wants to say the Jade Eagle token, or to name Victor. He wants to say anything clever enough to sound both brave and safe, but then he looks at the fake objects, at Marcus watching for a flinch, at Victor refusing to help, and Tessa suddenly sitting forward, with Frank clutching his ribs, totally torn between running away or launching a massive lawsuit. The test is real, he says. Lionel stares at him. He adds everything else. His theater silence holds. Then Lionel Whitlock bursts out laughing, not a small laugh and definitely not a polite rich laugh. He throws his head back, making Rocket start barking. Frank asks if they are alive, and Tessa whispers, probably. Marcus lowers his hand. Victor finally smiles. That is when Evan knows he has passed, not because anyone says so, but because the heavy danger suddenly leaves the room, leaving only embarrassment behind. Frank looks around at the fake study, then at the old men, then at Evan, muttering that none of this is real. Lionel wipes an eye with his thumb, confirming it. Frank looks personally betrayed by objects he does not even own. Rich people need hobbies with warning labels. Lionel points his cane at him, warning that he would have picked the sword. Frank hesitates, muttering that maybe it is the worst fake in the room. Looking hurt, he grumbles about still recovering from a kidnapping. Marcus speaks. Tessa is the first to laugh, allowing everyone else to breathe. Lionel walks over to the fireplace and presses a hidden latch under the mantel. A panel slides open right behind the bookshelves. Inside are storage drawers, wrapped samples, and thin folders. Evan does not need a lecture right now. He needs one sentence. Lionel gives it to him. This room is built from black kiln study pieces. That single name completely changes this fake room. Before it was just a rich man's prank. Now it is enemy territory. Victor steps forward. Gerald Crane was only one door, and this is the hallway. That is enough. Evan does not want a history lesson. He does not want this story becoming seminar with fancy furniture. Lionel picks up a black folder and sets it down right beside the Jade Eagle token. The Black Kiln Syndicate is copying old masterpieces, bribing small-time sellers, laundering reputations through respected auction houses, and grooming candidates for the American Antiquities Guild. Lionel explains. The details can wait, but the results cannot. He looks at Evan. Victor wants him under protection, while Marcus thinks he is too reckless. Tessa thinks Rocket likes him, which is apparently solid evidence in this house. Tessa lifts her coffee cup. Rocket has range. Lionel ignores her. He thinks Evan is just greedy, rude, and hard to buy. Evan says thank you. Lionel warns him not to make him regret that last part. He takes a cream-colored nomination card from the folder and places it right on the table. At the top, written in dark ink, are the words American Antiquities Guild. Underneath sits his own name, Evan Rowe, principal candidate. For a single second, the room feels completely real. The constant survival instinct inside him looks at that card and falls quiet, but only for a second. Then Frank makes a strange sound. It starts as a wheeze, turns to a sob, and ends as a laugh. He giggles out that he knows a principal, but Marcus corrects him, saying candidate. Frank says he knows a candidate, crying harder now. That somehow sounds completely unpaid. Victor steps right beside Evan. This card gives him access to exclusive rooms that would have thrown him out just last week. It also gives the Black Kiln a reason to stop treating him like a nuisance, basically a promotion and a death threat. Lionel nods, calling it an American tradition. Tessa looks at the card, asking if he joins them for dinner. Frank raises his hand, and Marcus says he is available too. No one asked him. The room shifted from threat to reward so fast. Evan's body Still does not trust it. His shoulder throbs. The crucial nomination card sits right under. His name, Victor and Lionel, stand on either side of the table like two heavy, locked gates opening at the exact same time. Lionel taps the card with his cane, asking if Evan understands what it actually means. It means the people who hated him yesterday must now hate him indoors instead. Tessa covers a quick smile with her coffee. Lionel ignores her. It means doors open, auction rooms, vault rooms, private family collections, and guild evaluations. It means a seller who refuses to speak with Frank Russo might actually answer a call carrying Evan's name. Frank perks up, saying he supports this title. Lionel warns it also means every fake expert Evan embarrasses can point higher. They will target his sponsors, Victor, Lionel, or anyone standing close enough to look useful. That thought cuts right through his excitement. Access is not just a prize, it is a bright flare. Victor warns him that if he accepts this path, he stops being just a lucky buyer and becomes a side. Evan looks at the card. Once again, the old Evan, the guy living outside the locked apartment door, would have grabbed it instantly, willing to sign in blood if it meant securing a real home. Evan weighs his options: a sore shoulder, a bleeding partner, and a suspicious cop who doesn't trust him, and a criminal network already switching from objects to people. He accepts. Lionel's expression does not soften, but the heavy tension in the room does. Marcus gives a small nod. Tessa looks at Rocket like the dog actually voted correctly. Frank wipes under one eye. It is beautiful, dangerous, and potentially very profitable. Evan is honestly proud to have been kidnapped into this company. Victor warns him not to make that their slogan: status, protection, access. The old circle has finally put Evan's name on a real door. Then, chance sight ruins everything. A red warning window snaps open at the edge of his vision. Brooks in danger. Chance Brooks suffers life-threatening injury within 1 hour, 34%. Evan freezes. The number climbs to 36, then 39%. His phone is already out. He calls Brooke, no answer. He tries again, nothing. Victor notices his panic first. Evan explains she is in danger. Lionel's expression sharpens. How does he know? That question has trapped him in tight spots before. He has no patience now. The same calculations that found Lionel's fake room are showing her odds dropping. Her odds keep getting worse. Marcus heads for the door, noting Brooke is working today. Victor pulls out his phone, remembering she had mentioned the county operation. The red numbers climb again, 42%. Tessa stands up, coffee forgotten, urging them to call her station. Victor does. Lionel watches him. Sit down if this is just fear or a guess. It is not. If you leave now, you walk away from a guild nomination before we secure it. The nomination card sits on the table, Evan's name printed clearly on it. 2 days ago, he would have sold a kidney for this kind of access. Now Brooke's unanswered phone makes the card feel like a trap, not a prize. Brooke had shoved him against a wall, threatened him, and suspected him. Yet she still moved when real danger appeared, completely blind to chance sight. She did not trust him, but she answered his warehouse call and walked into danger. She faced gunfire because he said Frank was taken. Her next call rate is 3%. Waiting for confirmation costs them 87% of the rescue window. He grabs the card. He folds the card once and slides it inside his coat. Lionel's eyes flash. Lionel warns him it is no souvenir. Evan snaps back to bill him once she is alive. Frank slides off his chair and winces, insisting he is coming along. Evan refuses. Frank jokes he is emotionally invested in not being the weakest rescue person there. Marcus effortlessly places a hand on Frank's shoulder and pushes him back down. "You are staying," Marcus says. Frank asks if he enjoys this. Marcus smiles. Victor ends his call, his face hardened. Her phone is off and the operation moved. The red number climbs to 47%. Evan asks Marcus if he can drive fast. Marcus is already pulling keys from his pocket. Lionel does not stop them. Lionel had tested whether Evan would lie. Now he watches if he abandons danger. Victor grabs Evan's arm before he can reach the exit door. "Bring her back," Victor says. "No old master act now, only a worried grandfather." Evan nods once. Tessa grabs Rocket by the collar as the dog tries to follow. She calls Rocket a chaotic landlord. Normally, that would have gotten some attention. The red danger meter hits 51%. Evan runs, Marcus right beside him. They cross the estate hall so fast that the staff hurriedly steps aside. Frank yelled about hazard pay. Tessa kept dialing Brooke. Lionel struck his cane hard against the floor like a judge ending the trial. The fake study gave Evan a title, but Brooke's number was changing everything. It turned that title into a heavy debt before the ink could even dry. Meanwhile, Marcus's car blasted through the gates, the system locking onto Brooke's name. It glowed blood red in his vision, and trust me, that scary number was rising fast. Marcus Pike drove like that red warning over Brooke's name was a physical hand, reaching through the windshield to grab him by the throat. The estate gates vanished behind them, but Victor Calder's final warning still echoed in Evan's ears. Bring her back, she faces a life-threatening injury within 1 hour. 51%, then 54, then 57. Marcus did not ask Evan for a map. He only asked where the nearest threat was. Evan checked his screen, keeping his voice steady. It is her operation, he said. She is alive now, but the danger is rising. The threat number climbs after the first arrest. Marcus's jaw tightened. He muttered that a first arrest does not end things, it just makes everyone relax. Evan hated when smart people made the scary reality so clear. Marcus turned hard. Enough to throw Evan's shoulder against the car door while his phone buzzed relentlessly. Tessa kept trying Brooke, and Victor was calling everyone he knew at the county. Lionel sent a single blunt text, "Do not die." Meanwhile, Frank sent 3 messages asking if Brooke was alive and threatening to bill Evan for the wait. Normally he would have joked back, but the threat percentage just hit 61%. All humor died right there. Marcus pulled up to a brick apartment building. Near the county line, police cruisers blocked half the narrow street. A man with a bleeding face sat handcuffed on the curb, screaming for a lawyer. Nearby, officers stood over a massive bag of illegal handguns. Everything looked completely under control. That false sense of safety made Evan's stomach drop. Brooke stood right by the entrance, perfectly fine, furious, her hair pulled back tightly. Her badge hung from her belt, a sleeve torn, barking orders like she owned the street. Yet the red indicator floating over her head did not go down. Instead, it hit 64%. Evan jumped out before Marcus even finished parking. Brooke saw him and immediately cursed, marching over to demand he get back. "This is an active scene," she yelled, but Evan warned that her suspect was not the danger. She glanced at the handcuffed man, insisting they had the weapons, but Evan pushed back. If they won, why was the number worse? Her jaw tightened at the question. Marcus stepped up, explaining that his own warning brought him there, and Victor knew. Brooke glared at them, furious they had dragged private security into a county operation. Evan joked that he was just cargo with opinions. She snapped his name. The sharp warning made him hesitate, but then his chance system flared back to life. It targeted the side alley, warning a second suspect was escaping out back. They had a hostage, 78% chance. A child involved, 91%. Evan's mouth went completely dry. He asked where the child was, making Brooke's face pale. A terrified woman near the entrance suddenly lifted her head in sheer panic. She had been shivering under a blanket, previously too shaken to even speak. Now she stood up, crying out that her son was still upstairs with her sister. She thought police had already saved him. Brooke spun around in pure shock. Someone flinched as the woman grabbed her blanket. The 7-year-old boy had a blue backpack. He was hiding in the back bedroom. The street changed, not louder but sharper. Brooke snapped an order to her nearest officer, then looked at Evan. She did not ask how he knew, not yet. Instead, she believed the warning just enough to move. Not trust. Trust was expensive. Operational credit was cheaper. And Brooke hated that Evan had earned even that. Marcus pointed toward the rear service route, but Evan looked toward the side alley. The odds of Brooke reaching the hostage route as she entered were 38%. Marcus breaking the rear gate, only 46% chance. Evan finding the correct service door was 87%, not front. He pointed to the side alley. Laundry door. Brooke did not wait for a committee. She ran. Marcus and Evan followed. The alley stank of trash and bad decisions. A rusted metal door sat halfway down the brick wall, its handle wrapped with a dirty towel just to keep it from locking behind them. Brooke saw the towel and went still for half a breath. "I cleared that hallway 10 minutes ago," she said. "Someone used it after you relaxed." She shoved the door open. Inside, a narrow service corridor ran behind the apartments with sweating pipes. Overhead, a child's shoe lay near the stairs. Then a scream echoed from outside a second later. Brooke picked up the shoe. Her face went flat, which was honestly worse than panic. The suspect reaching the rear exit before Brooke intercepted was 69%. If they shouted, the boy would hear. 76% chance if they went quietly. 44%. Quiet. Evan whispered. Brooke's eyes flashed. Because he had just given an order on her scene. Then she saw his face and swallowed her argument. They crept up the service stairs. At the second landing, a man backed into view, arm clamped around a boy's chest, holding a box cutter. Pressed to his throat, a blue backpack hung loose. The child's cheeks were wet, but he struggled not to sob, which somehow hurt even. Worse, the man saw Brooke's badge and dragged the boy tighter. Back up, he warned. Back up or I open him. Brooke froze, her hand hovered near her weapon, but the angle was garbage. Marcus stood right below Evan. Body coiled too large for the narrow stairs. Brooke shooting cleanly, 12%. Marcus rushing without injuring the kid, 18%. The suspect cutting him. If Evan spoke was 63%, shifting the blade away if insulted. 41%, terrible odds, but it was the best number on the table. The suspect shouted again to back up. Evan stepped right above Brooke before she could grab him. Her whisper hissed in his ear, "Evan, don't." He looked at the man and mocked him. "You picked a child because grown men kept disappointing you." His eyes snapped to Evan. "Good, bad, alive." He tightened his grip. "Shut up," the man snarled. "I would," Evan retorted, "but you look like an idiot who needs instructions. You have police below, cameras outside, and a kid who will remember your breath forever. Drop the blade and leave pathetic, or keep holding him and become famous for losing in a hallway." The boy's eyes shifted toward Evan. The blade moved half an inch from his shoulder. Chance of a tackle creating a safe opening was 52%. Then Evan's vision glitched. The blue window fractured red, severe calculation strain and unstable reserves. The numbers vanished for one terrifying second. Evan had no cheat, no clean route, no clever. Just a man with a blade, a child, Brooke holding her breath, and Evan standing in the wrong spot. The attacker jerks the boy backward, forcing Evan to make a move. He jumps, not well, not heroically. He hits the suspect around the waist. He drives him sideways into the railing. The child slips, but Brooke catches him. The box cutter scrapes his sleeve, missing his skin entirely, and spins down the steps. The suspect slams his elbow into the side of Evan's head. White light bursts behind his eyes as he hears Brooke shout his name. Marcus comes past like a moving wall, choosing to fall. He pins the suspect against the landing, taking him down so hard the old stairs shake. Evan hits the rail on the way down. The last thing he sees before everything goes dark is the little boy's blue backpack pressed against Brooke's chest while she holds him with both arms. That is enough. He wakes up in Brooke's car, not a hospital bed, not a heroic spotlight, just Brooke's passenger seat, a headache like a debt collector, and a square bandage near his hairline. Marcus stands outside the door, speaking to Victor on the phone. The boy is gone, the street calmer, the red window over Brooke's name completely gone. He slowly lifts one hand. Did he die cheaply? Brooke turns in the driver's seat. Her face does not soften. Her voice does. The child is alive. The second suspect is in custody. Paramedics checked him. He refused transport before even fully waking up, apparently because he is a financial disease. That sounds like him. She stares at him for a long moment, then she says thank you. 2 words, no sarcasm, hitting harder than he ever expected. He tries to sit straighter and immediately regrets having a skull. Do not make this emotional. He is concussed and vulnerable to sincerity. Brooke looks away through the windshield. He knew again before anyone else. There is the bill. Chance of lying fully convincing Brooke, 7%. Partial truth increases trust but risks exposure, 68%. Silence damages trust, 74%. He sees odds, he says as her eyes return. He adds quickly, not like a psychic, not like a vision board from a gift shop. Situations, risks, sometimes objects, sometimes people. It is not perfect, but it just points. Brooke's hand tightens around the steering wheel. Who else knows? Nobody knows it like he does. Victor and Lionel think he calculates. Frank thinks he is a cruel investment tool. Nat thinks he is an emergency boyfriend with suspicious timing. A corner of Brooke's mouth almost moves. Almost. Hide it better, she warns. That warning was no threat this time. It is protection with teeth. If the wrong people understand what he can do, they will not just test him with antiques. Brooke warns they will test what he can live through. Chance Brooke keeps his secret for now is 89%. The number flickers, then the entire window goes red. Reserve low, life protection. Override recorded. Further high load calculation may consume his future chance. Reserve. He stares. Brooke sees his face, asking what is wrong. The cheat saved him, he says, and sent him the bill. She does not ask for a lecture, good, because he does not have one. Marcus opens the driver's door, saying Victor wants them both at Whitlock Estate. Lionel says dinner will proceed because fear digests much better with witnesses around. That man needs a normal hobby, Evan mutters. Brooke unbuckles. Marcus says his grandfather is there. Waiting, Brooke's expression shifts. The officer becomes the... He looked at the granddaughter for a second, seeing how badly Victor's message had landed. When they returned to Whitlock Estate, Victor met Brooke in the entrance hall. He bypassed any dramatic hug, simply placing one hand on her head to check the tear on her sleeve, exhaling like he had been holding that breath since the call. Brooke insisted she was fine, while Victor stared over her shoulder, acknowledging that he brought her back, though Brooke quickly elbowed him without looking. Frank waited near the dining room, leaning on a cane he did not actually need. With a dramatic expression, he complained about being left behind. Frank grumbled about the family's attitude, while Tessa stood nearby with Rocket resting at her feet, mentioning they tried to sneak out before Marcus locked it. Frank grumbled about useless security, but Lionel's voice boomed from the dining room, telling him to sit down before he medically discharged him himself. That dinner should have felt like a reward with all its grand pieces. Heavy silverware, Victor on one side, Lionel on the other, and Tessa feeding Rocket under the table, while Brooke pretended she did not care that the entire table kept staring at her torn sleeve. Frank guarded his plate like an enemy might steal his bread. Right before the family snobs finally arrived, first came Natalie Whitlock Wexler, Lionel's exhausted granddaughter. She looked elegant, accompanied by her overly polished husband, Simon Wexler. He seemed harmless on the surface. Behind them walked Brett Harlow, flashing a sharp smile while trailing two younger relatives who seemed to expect free entertainment. Brett stared directly at him, sizing him up openly. He mocked him, calling him the market prodigy, and admitting he expected someone taller. Frank immediately raised a fork, demanding dinner before the insults. Natalie gave Frank a tired smile, but Simon remained completely stone-faced, staring at the nomination card near Lionel's plate, then at him and finally at Brooke's sleeve. The system predicted Simon hated the Evans Guild access at 72% before his vision glitched. He blinked hard. Brett noticed his pause and immediately pounced, asking if something was wrong. He mocked his magic eye, making the others laugh while Brooke glared back. Brett just smiled, telling Brooke that everyone was already thinking the same thing. Nobody knew him last week, and now he breaks vases, saves hostages, and wins nominations. Brett sneered that either the boy is brilliant or everyone is incredibly bored. Kendra was not even present, but her rumors clearly spoke through Brett. Neither Lionel nor Victor stepped in to stop him, choosing to watch silently. Another test. Brett laid 3 small items on the table: a dull paper knife, a bronze medallion, and an enamel box, challenging him to choose. He wanted him to name the piece that belonged in a serious collection. The system glitched, flashing error messages for the paper knife and bronze medallion. It showed the enamel box was bait at 61%, then dissolved into red static. His stomach sank. Frank whispered to choose forks, while Tessa said Rocket liked the box. Marcus offered no help from the wall, but Brooke watched him with a look of genuine concern rather than suspicion. Honestly, that felt so much worse. Contempt was survivable, but her concern made him dread failing. Brett leaned back, telling him to take his time, mocking that guessing is harder without a cheering crowd. An insult, a cheap trap, a choice. Fine. Evan picks up the enamel box first. He turns it over once. Too pretty, too clean, too eager to be chosen. He sets it down. This is what you wanted me to praise, Evan says, which means it is just trash with manners. The young relative's smile dies instantly. Brett's jaw tightens. Evan reaches for the bronze medallion. The medallion has the right weight, but the wrong silence. He cannot prove that yet. But he does not need to. He states clearly that this is merely the backup trap. It is good enough to tempt a coward, but not good enough for this crowd. They are all pretending not to enjoy this, Frank whispers, admitting that he is loving it. Finally, Evan lifts the dull paper knife. It has no drama, no shine, only a tiny repair. Victor watches his hand closely, offering the exact clue Evan's glitched system almost misses. There is an 83% chance Victor recognizes this paper knife. Just one clean flicker is enough. Evan announces that this belongs in a serious collection. Not because it is pretty, but because its owner never needed to impress fools. Brett freezes. Victor reaches across the table and takes the paper knife right out of Evan's hand. It belonged to his father, Victor says, explaining he had it removed from display this morning. Brett was explicitly told not to use it as a toy. His tone is worse than a shout. It is far worse. Brett's borrowed importance instantly collapses in front of everyone. Everyone he wanted to impress watches him stand. Brooke speaks up, telling Victor they should apologize. Brett glares at her, but Brooke's voice remains flat. He needs to apologize to Evan first. Then to her grandfather's table. The relatives go quiet as Brett swallows his pride. He does it so loudly even Frank could appraise it. Brett mutters his apology to Evan. Evan smiles, reminding him to apologize for the height comment too, since it was pretty lazy. Brett's ears turn bright red. Hearing that, Lionel laughs directly into his glass. That breaks the table wide open. Tessa claps once while Rocket barks under the table. Frank declares the apology acceptable but cheap. Brooke shakes her head in disbelief. Still, the corner of her mouth finally twitches. Then Lionel deliberately ruins the peace. He points out that Victor's granddaughter actually listens to the boy now. His own granddaughter already let her dog choose him, so maybe they should discuss a leash. They need to manage him before the guild seat makes him arrogant. Tessa brightens. Rocket chose him first, she says, and that is binding. Brooke points her fork at Lionel, telling him not to make her regret surviving today. Victor looks over at Evan. Running toward a blade for a child is either pure courage or defective judgment. Frank raises his hand, voting for defective but profitable. Natalie laughs softly. Simon does not laugh. He turns a black ring on his finger before stopping. He stops when he notices Evan watching. There is a 67% connection chance. The connection to the black kiln funding route flashes, then breaks apart. Critical reserves, Plan C is available, but it will cost his future chances. Evan's fingers go cold around his glass. Plan C sounds clean, but it is not. The system offers to keep calculating by borrowing from parts of his life yet to come. His future luck, future escapes, and doors that might stay locked if he gets greedy now. All just because he got greedy at a dinner table. Slowly, he lowers his water glass. No, not for a simple suspicion, not for Simon's ring, nor an unconfirmed prediction. Brooke notices his shift. Evan claims he has a headache, which is almost true. Dinner finally ends with more jokes than safety. Brett completely avoids his eyes. Brooke walks beside Victor, letting her grandfather fuss over her just this once. Lionel kept the nomination card locked under his palm until Chance promised not to. Folded again, Tessa told Rocket he had excellent taste but no legal standing. Frank swiped 2 rolls in a napkin, calling them medical supplies. Meanwhile, Simon left. Early with Natalie, polite enough to be ugly. Passing Chance, he whispered that a man with sudden access should be careful where he invests his friends. Chance looked at him, asking if that was advice or an advertisement. His smile stayed smooth. Both in the right market, Simon replied, then vanished. Chance had no idea what that was worth yet. He only knew the Chance site was too weak to price it without taking something from him. Outside the dining room, Chance's phone buzzed. Frank stood beside him, still chewing stolen bread, holding up his own device. A market contact had just sent him something, revealing that Asterbridge Capital Brokerage Front handles private money for collectors who avoid questions. He asked whose name keeps showing up around it. Chance stayed quiet. He already knew. Simon. Wexler's black ring, his warning, the broken pulse from the Chance site, and Frank's lead all pointed to that same door, but exposing Asterbridge while the Chance site reserve was critical, was dangerous. Waiting gives Black Kiln time to move funds. 88%. Chance entering Asterbridge without full system support creates a 71% betrayal payoff. Chance put the phone away. The rescue had saved Brooke. The dinner had saved his status. The system had survived both by handing him a bill he could not afford to keep ignoring. Then Frank offered a money trap while the Chance site was half dead, a risk that would usually stop him. Now it only made the door look more expensive. Frank Russo found Aster Bridge Capital because greed made him better at maps than morality. He had 3 market contacts, 2 bruised ribs, 1 stolen dinner roll in his pocket, and the confidence of a man who thought hospital discharge papers were polite suggestions. By morning, he had traced the whispers around Black Kiln money to a glass-fronted office tower in Harbor City. The Chance site was still limping. Every time Chance asked a hard question, the blue window crawled instead of snapping. System links Aster Capital to Black Kiln at 58%, followed by static. Simon. Wexler controls Aster Bridge decisions at 71%. Red reserve critical. Plan C available. Chance had refused Plan C at Whitlock Estate and refused it again. Outside the tower, he was not spending future luck just to make an accusation. Prettier, Frank leaned against a planter and adjusted the dark glasses he Insisted were medical, arguing he should be the reckless investor since chance. Looked like a reckless lawsuit that was merely investor-adjacent. Marcus stood by the curb watching the lobby doors, warning that Simon saw them both last night, but Simon only saw Chance with a concussion. Today, Simon gets a hat, tinted glasses, and more arrogance. Rich men love arrogance. They mistake it for liquidity. Frank looked Chance over, saying he looked like someone who won money too fast and bought the wrong coat. Marcus did not like the plan, which made three of them, but he understood the rule by now. Process only worked if it created pressure. They were not going into Astor Bridge to search files. They were going in to make Simon Wexler react where people could see him. Chance entered the lobby alone. Astor Bridge Capital smelled like polished stone, chilled air, and high fees. The front desk featured the company name in silver letters. The waiting area was packed with anxious clients and overly polite assistants. They promised absolutely nothing. Evan gave no fake name. He simply played a role. Private collector, he told the lobby assistant. Impatient, arrogant new wealth. The kind their boss either handles today or deeply regrets tomorrow. Her smile twitched. She asked for an appointment. Evan casually slid his phone onto the counter, displaying a massive bank account, letting numbers do what manners never could. Instantly, her posture changed. Wealth was the universal language for buying forgiveness. 10 minutes later, Simon Wexler walked out of his office. He wore a charcoal suit, a perfect watch, and the same black ring he turned. During dinner, Simon glanced at his tinted glasses, his loud coat, and instantly decided he was not worth remembering as Evan Rowe. That mistake gave Evan his first win. Simon greeted him, saying he understood there was serious capital to place. His tone was too warm. Men like Simon used warmth like Crane used certificates. I have capital objects in a very short attention span, Evan said, lowering his voice into something much harsher. He made money flipping antiques. Now he wanted bigger rooms. People claim Astor Bridge can make dirty Provenance look like a clean opportunity. Simon did not flinch at dirty, but he flinched at Provenance, a tiny, telling reaction. He warned that they avoid such vulgar language. Then what do you call it? Evan asked. Simon guided him into a private office. It was too close to the lobby for safety, yet far enough for privacy. Perfect for a man who believed layout equals control. Simon closed the door. Collectors often need bridge financing, quiet introductions, and reputation. Repair, Simon said. Astor Bridge does not move stolen goods. Evan countered that. He never said stolen, only dirty. A system window projected black kiln access. If his bait exceeded 8,064%, then the screen sputtered. Evan did not need the exact number. He offered 2,010,000 if the first door opens, but he did not want a lecture on respectability. He wanted to meet people who make counterfeits useful before old men smash them with hammers. That comment struck a nerve. The Liberty Dragon vase was still bleeding reputation. Through their elite network, Simon folded his hands, asking if he meant the recent incident at the Calder Gallery. Evan clarified he was talking about nobody getting paid $2 million just to swing a heavy hammer. Imagine what a serious investor gets for knowing where to stand. His ring turned. Once, Simon noted Astor Bridge maintains relationships with very discreet collectors, adding that some had been unfairly embarrassed by all this recent theater. If Evan wanted access, he had to prove he was not some gossip-seeking amateur. Evan calmly dropped two words, black kiln. The office went dead silent. It was a tense, guilty silence. Simon stood, commanding him to never say that name. It was not a full confession, but a massive slip. A system screen blinked. Simon was 79% likely to be protecting the black kiln route. Static swallowed the screen. Evan smiled like a foolish investor, hiding his sharp gaze. The name had value. Simon opened the door, telling him to have his people send proof of funds. Evan remarked that perhaps bored him. Simon shot back that maybe he was not a client. He escorted Evan back to the lobby, where wealthy older investors huddled together. They whispered urgently over their phones, while one nervous man clutched a withdrawal form. The paper bends tightly. Simon looks over the crowd, his smile tightening. It was close. Frank does his part outside by the time he steps onto the sidewalk. Two frantic calls already sweep through the collector circles. Astor Bridge is freezing withdrawals, trying to cover massive black kiln losses. They used family cash to plug the hole. Rumors are fast and ugly. He learned that the market respects fear. Now he returns the lesson. He pays it back with heavy interest. Marcus asks him if Simon bit. Marcus warned him not to mention Black Hill. Frank grins, he bit. Now they wait to see him blade. The first investor arrives at 10:42. 6 more arrive before 11 o'clock. By noon, the lobby changes completely. The lobby smells of panic and expensive coats. No paperwork drives this. There are no secret folders, just wealthy people demanding to grab their cash. I want my funds moved today. One older investor barks at the assistant. Another slams a phone down. They guaranteed liquidity. Was that a lie? A third client points straight toward Simon's locked glass office. I will speak to him now. Simon comes out looking like a drowning man. He is drowning in public, yet still trying to judge the water. He calls out Astor Bridge is stable, with no freezing issues. This is just a malicious rumor. Frank stands by the doors in shades. He whispers that stable sounds like his old van, saying reliable. He replies that since he was kidnapped, he deserves a hobby. Simon raises his hands, claiming 2 major clients are arriving with fresh capital. He asks them to trust his high-profile backers. It is a fatal mistake. Right on cue, Frank's 2 fake whales walk right into the lobby. They are just actors in cheap, borrowed coats, walking with supreme confidence. They look like they practiced being rich. One holds an empty leather folder. The other wears sunglasses indoors, which deeply offends Frank's sensibilities. Frank almost breaks character. Simon sees the fancy coats and chooses greed. Simon greets them loudly so the entire lobby can hear. Thank you for coming personally. Your commitment today means everything. The first fake whale shakes his hand aggressively. We like confidence, he boasts. We brought 8 million ready to place. The entire lobby shifts. If new money arrives, the old money might finally calm down. Simon smiles, but the second fake whale speaks up even louder. Before adding funds, pull our existing $3 million first. It is a standard confidence check. Simon freezes instantly. Every client in the lobby hears that word. Did he say existing? The older investor asks if they already had capital inside. He waves his empty folder, boasting about having tons of cash. Frank whispers that tons is the new currency. Simon tries to guide them away. A nervous investor with the bent form points, yelling that he knows him. He tried to sell estate watches at the pier and owes everyone money. The lobby turns. The fake whale tries to look offended, but fails. He looks completely unemployed. The second fake whale backs up and hits a table. A woman snaps, asking if those are the major clients. They are not, Simon insisted, but the first fake whale panicked and cried out. You told us to stand here and look confident, beautiful, not because it was true, but because Simon's face made it sound so convincing. Investor fear instantly became investor movement. The lobby erupted. People surged toward the counter with phones out and voices rising, every one of them. Suddenly needing absolute proof that their money still existed, Simon tried to. Smile tried to order assistance and tried to call security. Every attempt made him look smaller because the crowd had already seen him welcome 2 broke actors as saviors. Astor Bridge did not collapse because of one document. It collapsed because Simon Wexler made greed public at exactly the wrong second. He retreated into his office and shut the glass door. Through the glass, Evan saw him on the phone, his smooth face cracked, his ring turned fast enough to shine with an 83% chance he would move emergency family money. The number flashed clean and died. Evan did not need to see accounts. He needed human consequence. 10 minutes later, Lionel Whitlock walked into Astor Bridge Capital with Natalie Whitlock Wexler at his side, Victor behind him, and Marcus. Clearing space without touching anyone unless they made him, the lobby quieted. Because Power had entered wearing an old man's cane, Natalie looked at Simon. Through the glass, her face showing she already knew something was wrong. That hurt to witness, not because Simon deserved pity, but because Natalie did not deserve this moment he had dragged her into. Simon came out of his office too fast, calling Lionel. He claimed this was a manufactured attack caused by Evan Rowe. There it was, false. Blame right on schedule. Lionel did not sit or even ask for a report. He stood in the middle of the lobby with investors, assistants, Frank, Victor, Marcus, Natalie, and half of Simon's public reputation watching. Explain. Lionel commanded. Simon pointed toward Evan, or rather toward the loud investor he was still pretending to be, claiming he came here this morning wanting access to private collector funds. When Simon refused, he staged a run with actors. He is connected to the panic and might even be the black kiln plant. A few investors turned toward Evan. Frank's mouth opened, but Evan lifted a hand to stop him. Simon was Doubling down let him stand on his lies. Lionel looked closely at him, but didn't recognize the disguise at first. Then his eyes narrowed as Evan took off the tinted glasses and the hat. The lobby's attention snapped instantly into place. Simon. Stop breathing, Evan spoke in his own voice, telling Simon he really should remember. Clients who mentioned Black Kilm in his office. Natalie's hand went to her throat. Victor's face hardened. Simon recovered fast, but it was not clean. This proves his point, he stammered. He deceived us. Yes, Evan said, admitting he walked in as a greedy investor and asked where dirty assets became clean cash. Simon did not call the police. He did not throw him out. He simply warned him not to say Black Kilm in his office because the name had value. Simon laughed, saying it was just his word against his. No, Lionel interrupted. Everyone stared as Lionel's voice stayed low, stating his family reserve received an emergency transfer request from Astor Bridge 13 minutes ago. It carried Simon's own authorization code. He had moved family money to cover a public run he claimed did not exist. Simon turned white. With rage, Victor asked whose hole they were protecting the family from. Simon looked. He looks at Victor, then Lionel, then Natalie. The man's mask is completely slipping now. He rants about building this entire firm while being treated like a guest at his wife's table. Simon snaps, claiming he protected Whitlock money from their antique games. He cleaned up the messes those old men were far too proud to admit existed. Natalie whispers Simon. He freezes as he realizes he has said way too much, but this kind of public breakdown sounds less like an apology and more like a demand for credit. He steps closer, asking if Black Kilm paid him or if he paid them. Simon points a finger. You know nothing, but our hero knows exactly what Simon was hiding. He knows Simon's ring matches the office seal on the private fund card Frank received. He knows Simon recognized Black Kilm instantly, and he knows that when those fake high rollers walked in, Simon desperately grabbed them to look trustworthy. Simon turns to Lionel, warning him that this boy is manipulating everyone. Just ask Frank, Brooke, or Victor. He arrives poor but somehow walks away loaded. Frank limps forward, raising his voice to defend him. Frank says he manipulates scammers. There is a difference. Simon sneers, calling him a market clown. Frank just smiles, noting he never handed family money to a room full of panicked investors. The entire lobby reacts to that. A simple, brutal truth. Simon turns to Natalie, telling her to speak. Her eyes are wet, but her voice remains solid. Tell them what, she asks. That Asterbridge was totally safe, or that Grandpa never respected modern money, or how Evan would ruin things by making the guild look outdated. Which lie first? Simon flinches. Reality finally hits. Look at his face. It is not a file standing there, but his wife, speaking publicly with the sheer exhaustion of enduring his bitter resentment for years. Lionel lifts his heavy cane, tapping the floor once. The lobby goes silent. Simon Wexler, Lionel declares, you are officially stripped of every Whitlock account. No family office access, absolutely zero pending guild funds. You leave Asterbridge today. Simon looks at Natalie, begging for her help. She closes her eyes. For a second, maybe she leaves. But she doesn't. Natalie steps right beside Simon, making Lionel's face tighten. Natalie says she won't defend his actions or ask for business favors, but she refuses to divorce him in a public lobby for a clean ending. That complicates things, Frank whispers, messy but strong. He is absolutely right. Asterbridge has collapsed and Simon is completely exposed. The family consequences have landed, but Natalie refuses to put on a show. She won't let his punishment satisfy people wanting a neat, wrapped-up betrayal. Lionel looks older for a brief second before his steel resolve returns. Take him home, Lionel orders, not to the office or the accounts. Home. If he runs, call me first. Natalie nods and Simon looks around. The investors who once begged for his advice now look at him like bad debt in a suit. His pride is entirely shattered. Near the counter, an investor shoves a withdrawal form back at the assistant. He declares that if Simon's name is on it, he wants out today. That one demand does way more damage than any accusation. Simon hears it all. They all heard it. Lionel heard it too, his hand tightening around his cane. This was no longer just a private family shame, it was public market judgment. Frank held up his phone, showing Evan the collector chat that was exploding. The Asterbridge project was no longer up for debate, it was being abandoned. Simon wanted to prove he was more than a house guest, and he proved he could burn. Down the house, Frank leaned toward Evan. Do they clap? No, they leave before someone Bills them for the lobby. Victor stopped Evan near the doors. Black Kiln just lost a route. They would stop using polite pressure now. They had kidnapped Frank and tried reputation murder. That was polite for them. Victor warned that Lionel joined them, Kane in hand. The guild evaluation was moved up tonight. They could not let Black Kiln shift. Candidates before the room saw who they truly were. There it was, no rest, no victory lap, just shifting from payoff to pressure, because apparently that was the only rhythm Evan's life respected. Marcus said he would drive, but Frank lifted his hand. He was coming. He earned his seat. Marcus countered that he earned medical supervision. Said same chair, different label. Brooke called just as they reached the curb. Evan answered, and she did not waste any words. Simon was down, publicly and messily. Natalie stayed with him. Brooke paused for a second. That would hurt Lionel. It hurt the room. Then she said to listen carefully. After the Astor Bridge panic, 2 people linked to Black Kiln vanished before county officers could even reach them. Do not travel alone, do not improvise alone, and do not make the next dangerous thing funny. A box truck parked across the street suddenly started its engine. Chance. Truck enters traffic safely. Error. Red static crawled right across Evan's vision. Marcus opened the rear door for him. Evan looked at the truck. Chance of the truck drifting into Evan's lane within 30 seconds was 81%. His hand went cold around the phone. Brooke, he said, too late for the funny part. Marcus heard his voice and reacted instantly. The truck pulled away. For half a second it looked normal, then drifted across 2 lanes toward them like bad luck had learned how to drive. The truck did not rush them. That would have been easier. It drifted slowly enough to look accidental, but fast enough that Marcus Pike had just one breath to choose between the curb, the truck, or the sedan beside them. Chance of impact if Marcus brakes, 79%. Survival if he mounts the curb was 64%. Pedestrian injury, 42%. Then his vision sputtered red and lost the math entirely. Evan shouted left, but too late. Marcus turned left late. The car jumped the curb, clipping a trash can and scraping right past the truck with barely 6 inches and a scream of metal to spare. The truck kept going as if it had merely yawned in their direction. Frank slammed into the back of Evan's seat, howling that his ribs definitely have lawyers. Marcus stopped the car halfway onto the sidewalk, his face remaining completely calm, but his hands tightened on the wheel. Brooke was still on the phone. What happened? A truck, Evan replied, in accident. He watched the truck turning the next corner without stopping. Chance the truck driver knew Evan. Target error. Chance. Incident repeats if route unchanged, 88%. No, Evan muttered. Bad luck, just took a first swing. Marcus got them moving again, but the city had completely changed shape. Every intersection now looked like teeth. Every balcony looked loose. Every passing stranger with a hand in their pocket became a dangerous number he could not afford to calculate. Chance. Sight flickered around him like a dying sign, giving just enough warning to make fear could be useful, but not enough to keep him quiet. At the next building, a concrete planter crashed down from a 3rd-floor ledge. Marcus yanked him backward by his collar, slamming exactly where his head had been. Dirt exploded across the sidewalk. Frank stared at the shattered planter. That one didn't drive itself. Then came a motorcycle speeding forward. It jumped the curb near a crosswalk, its engine screaming front wheel aimed right at his knees. He grabbed Frank's hospital coat as Marcus shoved both of them behind a parked car. The speeding bike clipped the mirror and kept going. No apology, no stopping, and no face to punch. Black Kiln had stopped sending loudmouths. Now they just wanted their attacks to look like careless accidents. Brooke met them 2 blocks from the guild route with 2 officers and a look that said she had already run out of patience for his crazy survival style, declaring, "You are not going to the evaluation." But Lionel, speaking through the speaker on Marcus's phone, answered before he could. "He is going," Lionel said. "Hiding him lets Black Kiln choose their next move." Brooke snapped. "Letting him walk through staged accidents is no real strategy." Victor's voice cut in on the call. "Brooke, stay with him if they want this to look accidental. Make witnesses expensive." Victor's logic saved time. Expensive witnesses. His survival odds in crowds and cameras rose to 73%. He looked at the busy transit entrance nearby. "Crowds," he said. "Cameras, we make their next accident work harder." Frank raised a finger, saying, "As the least medically approved person here, I object." Brooke glared at him. "You are staying with Marcus." Frank lowered his finger. "I support women in command." They moved through the station, because hiding in plain sight felt just crazy enough to be right. Brooke walked on his left while Marcus kept Frank behind them. A security camera hung directly over the turnstiles. Busy crowds flowed around them, completely oblivious. A man in a gray cap stood near the far wall. He spotted him because the man wasn't looking at the train schedule. Instead, he closely watched reflections, glass doors, and his target's face. Moving behind him, calculated chance this gray-capped stalker was at all prior scenes was. Motorcycle path 76%. Finally, the threat had a clear face. He did not point. The platform crowded as the train arrived. A hard shoulder slammed his back. Chance being shoved onto the tracks was 69%. He grabbed Brooke's sleeve and stepped backward. A stranger's hand violently grabbed empty air where his spine had just Brooke spun, caught the wrist, and slammed him hard into the tile before he even realized he had missed. The gray-capped man moved, not toward them but away. That was more proof than any confession. He yelled out, "Cap!" Brooke and Marcus saw him. The gray-cap assassin slipped into the thick crowd, vanishing up the stairs with the patience of someone who had fallback plans. Brooke quickly cuffed the attacker and shoved him toward another officer. "Talk," she barked. "Who paid you?" The guy had blood on his lip and fear in his eyes, muttering, "I don't know, just cash in a locker, push and leave." That was it. No evil mastermind speech, no names, just quick cash for a dirty shove. Black Kiln had outsourced bad luck. Calculated chance the gray-cap assassin switches to direct methods after this failed attempt, 84%. His stomach tightened. They are done. Pretending, he warned. Brooke looked at him. Then we stopped letting him choose the scene. She was right, so he chose a venue they would absolutely hate, a busy cafe across from the guild building, boasting massive windows, countless smartphones, and outdoor tables. Right near a low lakeside railing, they grabbed the table closest to the cameras. Brooke sat where she could watch the street, while Marcus stood by the door with Frank, who complained until a waiter brought him coffee. Evan ordered food he did not want. Meal safety error. Drink safety is 97%. Soup safety is only contains poison 92%. Evan stared at the bowl. His interface gave one clean answer and then flashed red again. The waiter had already walked off, just a harmless extra, not the threat. The poor guy's hands were only shaking because of the hectic lunch rush. The danger lay elsewhere, watching to see if Evan ate. Gray Cap sat across the street, under the cafe awning, pretending to look at his phone. Evan lifted the spoon. Brooke's hand moved under the table to stop him. He gave her a tiny shake of his head, then brought the spoon up, tilting it against his lip without actually swallowing, and smoothly let the poison slide into a napkin in his hand. Gray Cap looked up just once. That single glance was enough. Evan wiped his mouth, forced his shoulders to loosen, and slumped back as if dizziness had hit him. Frank saw and nearly stood. Marcus clamped a hand on his shoulder. "Ow," Frank hissed. "My feelings are totally hurt." Gray Cap crossed the street. Brooke whispered to wait as the man came closer, moving with careful, deliberate steps. He glanced down at the soup bowl, then at Evan's face. He let his hand drop near the edge. The man turned away fast, not seeing the expected poison symptoms. He knew. Evan stood and stumbled toward the lakeside path behind the cafe. Brooke cursed under her breath, trailing behind him without making it obvious. Marcus and Frank fanned out wide, while Gray Cap followed Evan to the railing. The dark lake below looked freezing under the afternoon sky, small waves crashing against the concrete wall. The path was fairly busy with joggers, cafe customers, and a couple of cyclists, public enough for crowd eyes, yet dangerously close to the water. System projection, 83% chance he has a blade and tries to shove him. 47%. Brooke intercepts at 38%. Evan leaned on the railing and coughed into the napkin. Gray Cap closed in, then suddenly slipped, completely real. His shoe hit the soup. Evan spit on the stone. Talk about instant karma. His balance shattered just as he reached for Evan's jacket. The assassin grabbed empty air, hitting the metal railing with his hip and flipped halfway over it for one absurd second. He hung there, gripping the metal with wide, terrified eyes. Then he fell. The loud splash cut through the noise. Bystanders screamed. Brooke reached the railing first. "Do not jump," she warned. The hitman thrashed wildly below as his gray cap floated away. Chance of stage drowning, 68%. Becoming real within 30 seconds, 81%. Evan dying if he dives in, 39%. System reserve collapse if using plan C to calculate a rescue, 100%. Plan C pulsed in his vision, bright and dangerously tempting. He refused to use it. The drowning man screamed, swallowing icy water. His right leg was kicking unnaturally, tangled in a submerged maintenance float strap wrapped tight around his ankle. Brooke screamed for a life preserver. Marcus vaulted the lower fence, but couldn't reach the water quickly from his angle. Frank screamed. Evan, no, that was new. Usually, he only yelled no. Over money, but this panic felt real. Down below, the struggling killer had tried to assassinate him with trucks, planters, speeding bikes, direct shoves, and poison soup. Evan knew his intent as clearly as he knew his old locks had been changed. Letting the guy drown right now would be so easy, even clean. No. Future interrogation, and absolutely no threat of revenge from a persistent, sloppy assassin. He kept thinking of the child on the stairs and Brooke's warning. Victor's gasp when he saw her alive, and the system's offer to steal from his future whenever he got scared. He jumped, cold hit like a fist, and the lake swallowed his suit, his shoes, his breath, and every clever line he had left. He reached the man as he went under. The assassin clawed at him, panicked and ugly. He pinned his arm and grabbed the back of his collar. The assassin fought back even while drowning. Of course he did. He kicked toward the float strap, grabbed it with one hand, and yanked until his fingers burned. It finally loosened, and Brooke threw the rescue ring. Marcus grabbed the rope from the lower ledge and hauled. The assassin spat out water into his face. Stop fighting, he snarled. You're terrible at dying and worse at killing. That was when Chansey'd opened, not red, but blue. External risk credit recorded. A selfless high-danger rescue was accepted. Reserve stabilized. The system window burned so clear it hurt. Cade Rusk survives too. Custody, 96% Cade Rusk. The name appeared before Brooke pulled him onto the lower ledge and found the ID in his soaked jacket. For once, the system gave him the label after his actions had earned it. Brooke cuffed him while he coughed like water onto the stone. Reading the card, Brooke muttered that he was very bad at accidents. Cade glared at him with bloodshot hatred, but then fear arrived. Behind it, he rasped that he should have let him die, sitting on the wet concrete. Shivering until his teeth clicked, he considered it, thinking his review was mixed. Brooke looked at him, her expression shifting again. She had seen him save a child, and now the very man sent to kill him. That kind of witness was incredibly expensive. Marcus hauled him up by his soaked jacket collar. Frank limped down, stared at his ruined suit, and looked genuinely offended. That suit was new, Frank complained, but so was the assassination. Growth is brutal. Cade coughed once and stared toward the guild building across the road. Brooke crouched beside him, demanding to know who sent him. Cade smirked with cracked lips. He did not need sending. They just wanted the guild room cleared before the mold. Brooke's eyes sharpened as she demanded names. Cade's smile died when he realized he was alive enough to answer for it later. He shut up, but that was fine. He did not need a wet confession. He just needed him breathing long enough to make others panic. Wet and bruised, they headed to the American Antiquities Guild evaluation. Surrounded by witnesses, this was going to be anything but a formal hearing. Lionel had made sure of that beforehand, turning the entire room into a public duel. A long table, guild elders, collector families, and objects hidden under cloths. Near the back, Kendra Stone watched him like she hated that he had survived so dramatically. Nina Price stood by the wall with her arms crossed, looking exactly like a fake girlfriend forced to endure annoying rumors all morning. Tessa stood nearby, holding Rocket by the collar because apparently even the dog had high-status access now. Frank dragged a chair over and loudly announced to the room that near drowning was contagious, and he was avoiding it. Victor and Lionel stood at the front. Harlan Decker entered last. He had heard that name only after Cade's capture, when Brooke's quick calls linked him to a candidate sponsor and several black kills nearby. In person, Harlan did not look like a gang boss. He looked like the man who judged the gang bosses. He had impeccable manners, an older man with silver hair, a calm suit, and deceptively kind eyes, who foolishly believed in them. He looked at Roe's wet clothes and smiled gently, saying, Roe had a difficult day. He joked that his soup tried to kill him, but the service was still better than Roe's assassins. The entire room reacted to the jab, but Harlan did not. That composure made him dangerous. Lionel tapped his cane once, signaling the evaluation. A staff member pulled the cloth from the table, revealing a heavy clay master mold. It was dark from repeated firing, shaped to press a raised eagle and dragon design. It pressed borders into porcelain, looking rough and practical rather than a finished masterpiece. System check, 100% chance. The mold creates flawless black kiln copies. With an 82% chance, Harlan Decker valued it over his cover. The system returned. It was not fully free, but steady enough to sharpen the room. Harlan spoke up. He claimed the tool was interesting, but hardly proof of any living person's guilt. They were there to evaluate candidates, not dramatize rumors. Rose smirked and said that was good. Then they would not mind if he broke it. Harlan's eyes flickered with a tiny, beautiful panic. Lionel placed a small hammer on the table, the entire room lined in clothes. No board procedures, just a simple hammer, and a man who claimed not to care. Harlan folded his hands, warning that destroying guild evidence would be incredibly childish. Ro retorted that it was not evidence if nobody owned it. Harlan said it proved nothing. Perhaps it had historical value, just like that Libby dragon vase, until Ro smashed it. Kendra quickly covered her mouth, but she could not hide her smile. Harlan's fake kindness thinned completely. He hissed that Ro was making a habit of vandalism, only around fake authority. Ro replied that fake authority kept finding him. Victor stepped forward, announcing, "Candidates tied to this mold would be removed if it came from the Black Kiln." Harlan looked at the elders, asking if they would let a wet market boy decide things by throwing tantrums. There it was again, that old homeless market boy insult, upgraded for a wealthier room. 2 days ago, that insult would have hit bone. Now, Ro held a hammer in his hand. He watched Harlan resort to petty class contempt because his lies had run out. Ro raised the hammer. Over the mold, the system predicted a 77% chance that Harlan would stop him. Ro brought the hammer down, not on the mold, but right beside it. The table cracked loudly. 3 elders jumped. Harlan flinched and lunged forward before he could stop himself, screaming. Not to touch that mold. The room stared at him. He realized his mistake. Too late, Ro smiled. Ro asked why he cared. Harlan's jaw tightened as Ro lifted the hammer over the mold's edge again, repeating that it was just a random tool that proved nothing. He demanded to know why Harlan Decker cared more about this clay than his. Candidates, Harlan's calm facade finally split open as he roared that idiots like Ro destroy what they do not understand. He boasted that the mold made masterpieces old masters praised. For years, opening doors Ro had begged to enter. Did Ro really think breaking one cellar and one funding route killed the Black Kiln? Harlan had built taste into their very walls. Absolute silence fell over the room, carrying a final verdict. Brooke and Marcus moved away first. Harlan stepped back, but there was nowhere graceful left for him to stand. The guild elders pulled away from him like his ruined reputation was contagious. Lionel's voice cut through the room, declaring that every candidate tied to Harlan Decker was rejected and every object tied to this mold would leave guild consideration. Harlan looked at Victor, saying he could not erase him. Victor replied that Harlan had just introduced himself. Frank whispered loudly that it was quite a confession with furniture. She looks from the side wall and shakes her head, disbelieving that line. It actually works for him, Tessa says, noting Rocket believed in him first. Kendra stares at Aaron like she is watching a wealthier version of herself lose a room, taking quick notes on exactly what not to do. Brooke cuffs Heron right before the table. He does not fight. Men like him hate touching real consequences directly. Cade did. Simon did. Gerald did. Heron had paid them all to keep things clean. Now the room is dirty with his own words. Black Kiln's fake authority collapses in front of the table. The syndicate has lost its guild cover, its candidate route, its clean money bridge through Astor Bridge, its very own assassin, and the old calm face it. Plan to wear at the table. Lionel picks up the principal card with Evans' name on it. This time he does not hide it, handing it straight to him. Evan Rowe, Lionel says loud enough for the room. Principal member, do not make me regret surviving this much stupidity. Frank stands so fast he hears himself rise, yelling. Knows a principal. Marcus pushes him back into the chair. Victor puts one hand on Brooke's shoulder. Brooke looks at Evan, then at Cade being dragged past the outer door, then at Heron standing silent in cuffs. Hide it better, she says softly. He tried, but the soup was aggressive. She almost smiles. Nina walks over and straightens his ruined tie. For the record, her fake boyfriend. Becoming publicly important is highly inconvenient for her lies. He says they will adapt. They always do. Tessa pulls Rocket back before the dog can jump on his wetsuit. He wants to congratulate him, she jokes, or just ruin dry cleaning. Kendra passes behind them and stops just long enough to look at the card in his hand. For once, she does not threaten him, simply calling him impossible. He replies, now with seating. Her mouth twitches like she hates that. She almost laughed, then she walks away with far less power than she arrived. With carrying enough pride to make future peace incredibly expensive, the guild room empties. Slowly, because wealthy people love pretending that their exits are calculated strategy. Evan stays until Victor finishes speaking with Brooke, and until Lionel locks the mold safely away under Marcus' watchful hand, and Frank stops trying to sell his dramatic eyewitness account. By the paragraph, by sunset, this brutal day has taken his suit, his body heat, and several years off his nervous system, but it gives him a valuable card. Allies who witnessed the cost, and one more door, 2 days after his landlord changed. The lock, he stands before a harbor city condo with a key in his hand. Not a borrowed key, not a motel key, not some cheap novelty tag from a ballroom. His. The agent was just there for the paperwork, eyes darting nervously. Victor pushed the closing through cleanly, while Lionel simply called it a routine housing correction. Frank had asked if partners get guest rooms, and Nina texted that his first home desperately needs better lies. Tessa promised Rocket would inspect it, Brooke told him. To buy cameras before buying furniture, he puts the key in the lock, chance of the door opening. For Evan Rowe is 100%, he laughs. The old lock had thrown him out, but this turns because he told it to. Inside, the condo is completely empty, bare floor, bare walls, no antiques, no gala, and no crowd waiting to see if he trips. Just a quiet room that cannot be stolen by some petty man with a new metal plate. A chance sight floats at the edge of his vision, quieter now, chance of Evan using power greedily tomorrow, 61%, chance he pays a cost if he forgets today. 100% fair. The day his luck became expensive, he learned which risks he was still willing to pay for. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and listened to his own lock click.